Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei was forsaken by his parents and awaken Imagine Breaker powers from Imagine Breaker Movie 1. Before we start, please go support Charisarf1 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Issei is a male. In this story, Hyoudou Issei, or rather Issei, has the misfortune of being known as the black sheep of the family, being overshadowed by Yamato, his brother possessor of the boosted gear, and his sister Yuzuha with the gift of magic. During the course of his life, the unfortunate Issei decides to end his life, but fate is greedy, and the young man's life changes when he sees the power he possesses, a power that gave him the will to change his life for the better. Prologue. Narration. On a particular day, a strong storm was approaching the city of Kyoto. Students from different schools ran quickly to seek shelter inside their houses, while adults who left work early got into their cars or took the subway to return to their homes with their families, or that would be the case for those who have children, wives, pets, or other relatives. But leaving that aside, in a particular position there was a young man with black hair with a particular spiky shape, accompanied by black eyes devoid of life and the desire to live. While the boy was standing there with his hands resting on the railing of the large bridge, the storm came in his direction, bringing with it a very strong drizzle that soon soaked the young man, who did not seem to care. The young man's name was Issei Hyoudou, and today he was about to end his life in disgrace. What led him to make such a decision? Only he can tell you that story of his life, a story of pain. Issei's narration. Hello, my name is Issei Hyoudou, or better yet Issei, since my parents took away my last name Hyoudou, and because I don't know it, I never knew why they did it. They always hated me since I can remember, as well as my two older brothers, Katsuki Hyoudou, who was the oldest, and my second sister Yuzuha Hyoudou, who was the middle one. The two, along with my parents, always treated me badly. They hit me without a genuine excuse and insulted me whenever they could, and the worst thing that could have happened to me was being a great victim, and the culprit was none other than my own mother. Not only that was my misfortune, there were many more instances of my torment that made me to the point of not being able to remember the innumerable means of torture I was unjustly put through. Surely one would think that when I started school it would be a little better, or not. Well, no, because my torments simply went from normal to hellish. Everything in that school was much worse for me. Humiliated, tortured, and mistreated, I am simply surprised that I did not die in the process. My body gained more resistance for each time I suffered, to the point that the next day I did not feel any pain, and my wounds healed at a superhuman rate. To take a break from my torment, not everything was bad. I had met a girl who seemed to be from another school because of her school uniform. We had a good time together, to the point that I fell in love with her, and one day I confessed my feelings for her, believing that she was the one and hoping to be accepted. I was a fool at that time. Unfortunately, the next thing that happened was what led me to where I am today. She turned out to be my own sister, disguised to play a rather heavy joke on me and to play with my feelings, a cruel trap on her part, and that of my supposed brother, along with some other guys, that left me as I am now, to the point of not being able to take it anymore. I left school and arrived at that bridge while rain was approaching in my direction. I prepared to end this once and for all and say goodbye to this shitty life. With nothing left to lose in my miserable life. End of narration. The rain grew stronger with each passing minute, while the channel of water that had once been a small river became a huge current of water that moved furiously, carrying with it remains of metal parts, large tree branches, garbage, etc. Everything that the water touched was carried away mercilessly, constantly being buffeted by the strong waves. But that didn't matter to the boy, who, now standing on the railing ready to jump, just let out one last sigh and let his weight guide him forward, letting himself fall towards his end. Only instead of the building, a bridge is thrown into the turbulent water. That was his end. Nothing stopped him from committing suicide, not friends, not family, not even an acquaintance. That was all a boy who was always alone, and no one gave a damn about what was happening in his life. But as his body descended toward its end, time slowed down until it seemed as if everything was moving in slow motion before his eyes. The young man felt a tickling sensation in his right hand, a pure white glow adorned his palm, and the boy's lifeless eyes reflected that glow, where a voice manifested itself and spoke to him. What a pathetic way to die! Those were the words of that voice coming from nowhere, but the young man believed that that voice came from his own hand. A strong and imposing voice was the most exact description for said voice. The boy did not know what to do or say at that moment, but the strong impact of the current took him to the state of unconsciousness, being carried by the strong waves that hit his body to who knows where. Minutes later. Cough, cough, cough. The loud sound of the boy's coughing, who had begun to get all the water that had fallen down his throat and lungs, wondered if it was a dream what was happening to him, and unfortunately for him it was not. His left arm was healed as well as his leg. His bruises, scratches, cuts were still there. His clothes were wet as a sign that his suicide attempt was real, and for a moment he thought that maybe someone saved him. Looking from one side to the other, he didn't find anyone nearby, thus killing his hopes. In his disappointment, the boy only lowered his head, hugged his legs, began to sob with the question in his head of why he didn't die when he fell into the river. Fortunately, there was someone to answer his question. If the reason for your crying is because you don't know how you're still alive, that's thanks to us, Brat, said the unknown voice that was present again, to the surprise of the young black-haired boy. The black-haired boy looked around in search of the voice, to the point of putting his attention on his right hand that particularly seemed to release a silver glow accompanied by particles of light that floated above it. That voice, is it coming from my hand? He asked himself without expecting an answer, but in the end he got one. Even though it sounds strange, you're right, Brat, the voice responded to the child's doubt. At first, the young man was upset by the impossible, but after a few seconds he took a breath and calmed down. Due to his depression, he did not feel like starting a scene that would attract the attention of anyone who was near his current location. Still sitting, he looked at his hand and asked a question to the new being in his hand again. You saved me, right? The boy asked, expecting a quick response from him. That's right, Brat, I was the one responsible for saving you from your useless attempt to die. The being's annoyance could be felt in his tone, and it didn't take a genius to know it. Although there were still doubts for the boy. And because you saved a useless person like me, said the black-haired man in a neutral but sad tone. Simple, Brat, you do not deserve death, either today nor ever, the entity clarified to its bearer, who did not accept its words. But I am, he was going to continue, if it weren't for the light that covered his hand that became stronger, and something, or rather someone, began to emerge from it. The light made a path through the earth until it began to spiral upwards. The tip of the light began to grow and take the shape of a snow-white dragon's head. It had a certain variety of horns around its head and teeth as white as its scales. The dragon head looked straight into the boy's eyes, who was scared by what he saw. It's not every day that someone like that comes out of your arm and starts talking to you as if he were your boss or something. But what terrified him the most was seeing the dragon head open its jaws ready to bite, and without giving him time to think, the dragon bit him, leaving the upper part of the boy inside its mouth. Issei didn't know what to do. He was so scared that he just closed his eyes, waiting for this living nightmare to end his life. But the only thing he could perceive was a peculiar sound of broken glass before feeling a great change in his mind as in his heart. The unfortunate raven waited for death, when it turned out to be the opposite. His body felt light, as if a huge weight had been removed from his back. The bad memories that tormented him every chance they got were replaced by warm memories that he didn't expect to see. Said memories were divided into unique moments of his life, like the day he met his first childhood friend Hyoudou. The moments where he helped those who needed it, and the few moments where his good deeds were rewarded by those he once helped. The freshest memory was a recent one. In that memory you could see the same white aura coming out of his hand to stretch out and hold on tightly to the end of a steel bar that was stuck in the ground, and thanks to that his life was saved by the entity in his right arm. When finished, the dragon released him from his jaws to see him, noticing the state of disbelief and astonishment, but above all the shock of what he experienced inside him. What was that? He asked, coming out of shock, looking at the dragon in front of him. Your memories, Brat, was the dragon's clarification. You only remembered the bad memories, and I simply made you see your life from a different angle, the dragon clarified again to the boy. Why? The black-haired man asked. Why do you waste your time on someone like me? His tone was downcast, as if any ounce of trust was non-existent. Because you deserve something better, the dragon replied. You are someone who has the same right to live as anyone else, and neither I nor anyone else can say otherwise. The seriousness of his words were quite visible to the dragon, but not to the boy. But he continued. I know it's hard and it hurts, But you have to keep going and just give up. He said this in an attempt to motivate the boy. But Issei showed the opposite of being happy. And whether I have the right to live or not, and no one will miss me if I die, he shouted in anger at the words of this supernatural entity. Those who helped me only did it out of pity or regret for not helping me before. I never felt the warmth of a real family. My only friend is gone, and I don't even know if he remembers me or not, and what's the point of going on if I'm only going to continue to suffer? Gasp, gasp, what's the point of going on? The boy took out all his resentment in front of the dragon, who only listened, and when he felt his cheeks wet he turned around to try to stop them without success. The dragon's head finished waiting, and with a light bite he turned the boy's body so that he could see him, and say a few words from the depths of his being. Now listen to me, Issei. Hi, not just Issei. A serious but calm tone came out of his voice, and he continued. You have the strength of your greatness, but you have to take the helm and decide your own course. Follow it no matter how much it hurts, and when time comes to tell you that you have to use your sails and be a man and looking at the cloudy sky, I hope to be there receiving some of the light that you emit that day. Deep words that reached the hearts of many, who only remained silent before lowering their gaze once again. The black-haired boy let out his sadness, starting to sob at the words of the dragon that occupied his arm. Those words were needed to motivate him, and so he could move forward. He could only let out everything he had held back over the years, while the dragon coiled around him to give him its warmth and make him feel less alone. After a while the young man felt better about himself, so much that he stopped crying, and when he finished wiping away the remains of his tears he looked at the dragon in search of some answer. What should I do now? The boy asked. I have nowhere to go, at least not in Ko, he said, somewhat thoughtful about his future plan. I propose we leave this city, suggested the dragon, and the young man did not look badly on the idea. Well, maybe you're right. The boy was convinced by the idea. If I remember correctly, I have the keys to an apartment that belonged to my grandfather, but he left it to me when he passed away, the young man commented, remembering the home where the aforementioned lived. And where is that apartment? Asked the dragon, not knowing the location of the possible new home. Well, in Kyoto, far from Ko. The young man, already standing, looked at the dragon, waiting for answers. Well, that place will be your new start in life, brat, said the dragon, and the young man nodded also. Maybe there you can practice your handling of your newly awakened power. The raven looked at him confused, not understanding what he wanted to say. You will explain it later. But now you must return to your old home and look for what you need before leaving. The boy trembled at the idea, but nodded, confirming that he would go back to his home before leaving. Issei once arrived near the house, he made sure not to be seen by anyone on the streets of his neighborhood, and also made sure to look through the windows of his supposed home to make sure his family was not at home. With the green light confirming that there was no one, he entered the house, and without wasting time he ran to his room. In the corner of his room the young man moved one of the few pieces of furniture present in his room and then removed the loose floorboards, finding a shoebox. Upon opening it he found his savings, that most of the money was from his grandfather, who gave him money secretly so as not to be seen by the raven's parents. Taking his only good backpack, the boy packed all his clothes in good condition along with the money, and with the backpack on his back he went out ready to leave. As he went down the stairs, standing halfway, the young man noticed the door handle turned. To his horror, and without thinking, he went down to the living room. He threw the backpack under the sofa near the window that looked out onto the patio, and acted as if he had just arrived home before the door opened, revealing the familiar face of the young black-haired boy, the same face that he wished not to see during that same day. Oh, I see you're here, Issei. The one who spoke was none other than her sister Yuzuha Hyoudou, middle daughter of the Hyoudou family. Hello, Yuzuha. Issei didn't dare look her in the eyes. The memory of what happened before was still fresh in his memory, and the sensation in his right hand was strong. But the boy prayed that nothing crazy would happen. How did it go at school? He tried to change the subject. Boring as always, she answered while analyzing her younger brother with her eyes, noticing the water that accumulated on the carpet of the living room where the raven was standing. I see that you were a victim of the rain because of your wet clothes. At those words, the young man cursed himself for not having changed his clothes. He concentrated so much on the idea of looking for his things that he forgot that detail. At least she thought that he was caught in the rain, and did not think about the idea of his suicide attempt. But being distracted with his reprimand, he did not notice that Yuzuha approached him, and when he realized it was too late for him, because his sister was already in front of him, while the young man's gaze remained fixed on the ground. Issei, she called out to the aforementioned, are you planning to run away? The question froze Hyoudou's blood and the sensation in his hand increased every second. Not knowing what to do or say, the young man with all his might just nodded at his older sister's question. Tears were coming out from the pain. He knew he was screwed, and he knew very well that if his father found out, things were going to be worse. Silence reigned for a few moments, but Yuzuha could not stand the silence and therefore stepped back, much to the relief of the brunette, but things did not end there. Tell me, Issei, do you hate us? Another question came out of the girl's mouth, and the boy's heart stopped, as did the feeling in his hand. If it had been before, the young man would have said no, but right now his heart accelerated. He felt his blood burn, and his feelings that before were pain now were the opposite. He didn't know if it was his courage, or maybe it was because of the dragon in his hand. But one thing was certain, and that was that Issei now had the courage to be honest with himself, and his answer was quick to emerge. Yes, he answered without looking up, and clenching his fists he continued, I hate them all. I hate Mom for abusing me when I was just a child. I hate Dad for all the beatings he gave me until I almost fainted, and also for throwing a bottle of alcohol at me every time I bled. I hate Katsuki for ruining my school life since we were little, and above all, clenching his teeth angrily, he looked up to see his sister in the eyes. I hate you for playing mercilessly with my heart, Yuzuha. In the end the tears fell, and the boy stood there feeling relieved to be able to say what he felt. Yuzuha didn't say anything and just listened to every word of her brother. She knew that he had been keeping everything to himself for a long time, but at least he had the opportunity to say what he wanted. The female turned and walked towards the stairs, stopping halfway there. Without looking at him, she gave him a few words before going to her room. You have 1 hour to run away from Ko. The others will soon arrive home. To the surprise of the dark-haired boy, his brother was helping him for the first time. When you leave, never say anything about us, and don't use the last name Hyoudou. Get rid of it once and for all, Issei, and run away from your hell. With that said, the girl left, and after a few seconds the door to the room was heard closing. While the young man, incredulous at what had happened, reacted in time, and without waiting for anything, he took his backpack and left through the front door towards the train station. At the same time, Yuzuha, hearing the slam of the entrance door, leaned against the door with her gaze downcast. From between her uniform, she took out a necklace that contained the photo of her deceased grandfather, and with a neutral look, but with pain in her eyes, she dedicated a few words to the photo. I'm sorry for being a granddaughter and a shitty sister to Grandpa. This is the only thing I can do for him, were her words before hugging the necklace and closing her eyes. Wishing the best for the boy who was once his little brother. A journey on foot that lasted at least 30 minutes, the same amount of time that was needed to get to the station. The young black-haired man was victorious with his fist in the air, but he didn't want to waste any more time. Without further ado, he went and bought the ticket. Waited a few more minutes, and the train to Kyoto was already in front of him. Gathering his courage, the young man stepped forward and entered the train, looking for a place and sitting down with a view out the window while the dragon in an intangible form and invisible to the normal human eye appeared in his hand. Are you ready, brat? A strange question, but it made sense after all this. It changed everything. I'm still unsure, but it's better than staying here. A sincere answer came out of him. Once you adapt to your new life, we will begin training your powers. I hope you are ready, boy. With that said, the dragon disappeared, leaving the raven with a doubt. By the way, you never told me your name? Being aware of that detail, the dragon thought about it a bit, but he didn't care much. Well, names aren't important, and you can call me whatever you want. I don't really care, replied the dragon in the boy's mind. We'll think of something, and by the way, what will we do apart from training once we get to Kyoto? He didn't complain about the idea of training, but what else were they going to do? Apart from training and mastering my power, you will have to meet the others. What the dragon said took the boy by surprise. I'm not the only one inside you, brat. There are 7 others, and with me we are 8. It won't be easy, but I have faith that you can achieve it. Like, he did. That last thing caught the boy's attention. Who was that he? But it didn't seem like he was going to receive an answer for that doubt. It was better to ask more in the future. But unfortunately for him, the idea of meeting 7 other dragons terrified him. So I have not only one but 7 more dragons inside me, and I have to earn their respect too. Mental sigh. This is going to be a long journey for me, he spoke mentally to himself before saying a phrase that he will say very often in his adventure to his new life. Fukuda, what a shame. And so Issei Hyoudou, or rather now Issei, left the city of Kyoto to begin his journey where an infinite number of moments await him, both good and bad. But the question is, will he be prepared for that? Cap 1. Narration. After Issei got on the train to escape from his life in Kyoto, heading to Kyoto with the few things that were his and his savings to live well economically, leaving behind his past as a member of the Hyoudou family, and start a new life in Kyoto being a new him. About 2 or 3, maybe 4 hours of traveling by train, he arrived at the Kyoto station. The same place where he got off and went to his grandfather's apartment. May he rest in peace, while listening to music to make the trip on foot less long. Arriving at the place after about 20 minutes of walking from the station to here, the young raven approached the counter where he was served by an elderly man who looked at him seriously. Issei for his part showed the key with the room number, and upon seeing him the man left his serious look and gave a smile to the raven, who, confused, did not know what to do. It turned out that the old man was a childhood friend of his grandfather, and he owed Issei's grandfather a favor, so he saw no problem in giving him the apartment. And it was not necessary for him to pay the rent. It was a gift in memory of his old friend, and with that clarified, Issei headed towards his new house. Upon arriving at the specific apartment, the young man took the key and inserted it into the slot, removing the lock and entering inside, noticing the cold, desolate place, and the furniture covered with plastic to avoid the dirt and death. With a sigh, he went to his now room, and upon removing the plastic protector he lay down on the double bed, which was quite comfortable for him. Inala and Exala, how soft is this mattress, said the boy, feeling how his body was absorbed by the softness of the sheets. I still can't believe that I literally ran away from that living hell. From the boy's arm the dragon manifested itself, staying in the air above the young man. Well, believe it, boy, because it's completely real, said the dragon before descending and lying down on the soft mattress. How do you feel now that we are far from your city and your shitty family? I looked at him out of the corner of my eye, waiting for an answer, while the boy looked at the ceiling without saying anything. I don't have anything to tell you, he said before sitting on the edge of the mattress. I feel free to be away from them, but also I feel empty, without a purpose in my life, he answered, unmotivated, because he himself accepted that possibly his life would end at the hands of his father, or that he himself would end with the pain in his heart. The dragon only fell silent because of his connection to the young man's soul. He knew how he truly felt, and simply the feeling of emptiness hurts, and only oneself can cure that pain. Don't take it so seriously for now. The best thing would be to find something to eat, don't you think? The dragon offered him a way out, which the young man took along with his money and headed towards the supermarket. Taking advantage of the little sunlight that was giving way to night in the afternoon, the young fugitive spent his hours buying supplies for his days in his new home, adding that before heading home he bought dinner for that night, which was some chicken snacks accompanied by potatoes and 2 dressings for company. Good with today's purchases. Everything should last me at least a whole month according to my calculations, as long as I don't eat out of depression, he. While looking at his purchases, the young man didn't notice the person who was passing by him, so he ended up colliding with said person. Oops, I'm so sorry, I didn't pay attention to where I was walking. He quickly apologized to the person in front of him, who seemed to understand the mistake. Yohohoho, no problem, young man. It didn't hurt me even in the bones, yohohoho. The man just laughs at the situation despite seeming like someone suspicious. Wearing a sports suit accompanied by a large scarf that covered his face and sunglasses that covered his eyes, Issei could not help but look strangely at the appearance of the man who hid his face. But when he looked down he noticed that he was not alone. Excuse my intrusion, but is that child with you? Attention was directed to the child, who was next to the mysterious man. Except that, unlike the scarf, the child was wearing a plastic mask in the shape of a dog. Yohoho, yes, he comes with me. He is the son of a friend of mine. I am taking care of him until he returns from work. And as for me, if you ask about my scarf, this rascal drew my whole face with a marker. That is why I am very embarrassed to show my face to the public. An explanation that is not very credible. But if he was telling the truth, then I was judging him wrong. Well, if you say it like that, then I don't see any problems accepting what they said. The young man apologized, and the two of them left on the opposite side of the black man, who went straight to his new home where he ate and went to bed, hoping that tomorrow won't be as complicated as today. Normally, sleeping would be a difficult task for him, but tonight was different because this time and perhaps in the future, he could finally sleep without feeling in danger at every moment of his life. The next morning, the sun gave its usual morning greeting, the same greeting that woke up the young Issei when he felt the sun's rays on his face because they filtered through the window of his body with both curtains on each side. Issei woke up slowly before yawning and stretching his arms to start a new day. He went to the bathroom, did one, brushed his teeth and face, changed clothes, and arrived at the front door to go out and get a delicious breakfast. Although he knew how to cook and so on, the young man wanted to start the morning with a delicious breakfast from some interesting place. Noticing a stylish local in the distance, the teenager chose the building for his morning meal. After a while of walking, he arrived at the place, went in, sat down at one of the many tables and chose his order. After looking at the menu, and the employee took the order and then went to the kitchen. While the young man, the Dragon King who was currently awake, perceived two presences unknown to the young man, ignorant of the situation. Without delay, the Dragon King came out of the boy's right arm and in a smaller form like that of a snake approached the ear of the raven, who only lightly knocked on the table. "Brat, pay attention," I spoke in a whisper in a serious tone near Issei's ear. "What's wrong, Luke? And why do you come out of nowhere like that? What if someone sees you talking?" The young man made sure to see if anyone was watching him, and luckily for him, nothing seemed wrong. "Don't worry about that detail. No one but you can see me," he said, calming the boy's worries. "But apart from that, only I decide if I want someone else to see me besides." Voice Issei nodded at the recent information. "Now I understand. But why are you telling me to be alert? Is there danger or evil in sight?" The black-haired man could feel the fear in his body. He was not yet ready to return to the battlefield, and the dragon knew it perfectly well. "Don't be afraid, brats. Just breathe and erase your fear." With harsh words, the young man slowly calms down. "It's time for me to teach you some things that will help you in the future. First, close your eyes and imagine the current of a river." The black-haired boy closes his eyes and imagines a river. "Okay, I got it," the young man confirmed. "Now imagine that the energy of everything around you are river currents. The more altered the current is, the closer you will be to perceiving the power of a possible being out of the ordinary. Paying attention and following the instructions." The young man imagines each presence of each person inside the place and turns them into a river inside his head. Slowly he observes carefully so as not to lose the image, but in a carelessness the boy collides with a strong current of energy, seeming that at any moment a tsunami would come out of there. "Cut the image now," quickly obeying the order. The black-haired man comes to his senses to hold his head in pain. "Ouch, it hurts," the boy commented with a headache. But thanks to them he was able to know where the possible threat was that the dragon spoke of on his shoulder, and he discreetly looked in the direction of the presences. How could he detect the energy of a person somewhat far from his table, the same place where two people were, a man and a woman? The first was a dark-skinned man with a trained body, a red bandage covering his eyes and wearing boxing pants accompanied by a shirt that exposed the man's chest and abdomen. While in front of the subject was a girl of the same skin color as the man, a body also in shape, snow-white hair, ruby-red eyes. She wore a white shirt along with some tight jeans showing her fit legs plus a look of few friends while she ate. Although that did not erase her attractiveness, and the young Issei had to admit that she seemed quite pretty to him. Issei, upon initially sensing the energies of both people, couldn't help but question whether they were truly human or not because their energies were very different from the other people inside the place. The dark-haired man knew that if they found out that he was spying on him, something bad would surely happen, so he decided to be cautious and look surreptitiously in their direction. But after a while his heart stopped for a second when he saw the man with the blindfold look in his direction. "Why is he looking this way?" the boy thought nervously, still with the subject's gaze fixed on him. "Act normal, boy. He still doesn't detect anything out of the ordinary in you. Act normal," the dragon said to the young man, who at least tried to be normal. "Sorry for the delay. Here is your food." The waitress from before arrived with a tray to Issei's table and carefully left what would be the young man's breakfast. "Thank you very much for your service," the young man thanked before seeing the girl leave and trying to act normal. The young man had breakfast even though someone seemed to be hungry. "Gives half of that fried egg." Issei just split the egg in two with the knife, and with the fork he brought it to his right hand. The dragon came out and ate the egg. "Delicious," he commented before returning to Issei's interior. While the young man was having breakfast, the man with the bandage was still looking in his direction, but his table companions seemed to see him strangely. "Brother, why are you looking so much in that direction? Is there something that caught your attention?" asked the woman, looking for a while at who could be her brother. "Nothing special, my sister, it's just that boy hasn't been watching us just a few seconds ago," the dark-haired man said, returning his attention to the woman. "Well, that's obvious. Your way of dressing really draws a lot of attention." The dark-haired man looks at his clothes and can't find the defect in them. Sigh, how annoying, the woman muttered. Well, we'll talk about my clothes later. Now we'll get back to the important things." The man's demeanor changed to a more tense and serious one as he looked at his sister. "You still have that pain in your leg, Rumi?" "Unfortunately, yes, Leeson," the woman known as Rumi replied. "My instincts warn me of danger. Something big must be coming, brother, and we must do something." "I know, sister. When your instincts speak, then something bad is about to come. The problem is that we already checked all the limits of our borders and there is nothing there." Leeson seemed disoriented, but he always trusted his sister when it came to detecting danger. "We have to keep investigating, and we also have to make sure to tell Yasaka before everything goes to hell." Rumi was going to hit the table, but Leeson took her hand to stop her. "Current alarm will only bring chaos before time, my sister." Leeson releases Rumi's hand. "We will continue investigating, but we must also take care of our current task." "I know, you don't need to remind me." Mirko sighed before his current task seriously. "How difficult is it to take care of a girl of, I don't know, 8, maybe 12 years old?" Leeson let out a light laugh. "Remember that she is an only child, and like a daughter she wants her mother's attention." Rumi just snorted at that comment. "I know that too, bro. Literally, Yasaka should leave her duties for a while and concentrate on her daughter for at least an hour," the woman said as she stood up and left money on the table. "Come on, it's better to take a wrong step than hurry up or whatever." "I don't think that's how you say it, but I'd better follow you before that frown gets bigger." In response, his sister just raised her finger and both siblings left the place to the relief of the boy, who dropped into his seat. "We were saved from that," the black-haired man commented, finishing his breakfast and leaving the club a few minutes after the newly minted duo of brothers. Scene change with Issei. The young man once left the premises. At the words of the dragon, he looked for a place without people to train in private, avoiding attracting unwanted attention from people who were unaware of the supernatural far from the city. The young man arrived at a forest somewhat far from civilization at a slow pace, and in a straight line he arrived deep in the forest where there was an area without trees accompanied by a waterfall where a pond was formed. The Dragon King appeared in his normal size, looking around, feeling the pure air of the natural area that surrounded them. "Very well, boy, this is where your training will be from today, you understand, right?" The young man's response was a nod. "You still have a long way to go to be able to speak with other dragons inside you. Therefore you will have to practice my element until you are ready for the others. I only have one question, and that would be, when can I meet you?" The dragon thought for a moment and spoke. "First you must master at least 20% of my power, and once you are ready you will meet the others one by one." With a serious tone, the dragon showed the seriousness of the subject of dragons. Dragons are proud by nature, so disrespecting one is certain death. If he wanted to gain the trust of such creatures, then he would have to be patient. "Well, where should I start?" the black-haired man asked. "For today I want you to start with basic exercises that you learn in a normal gym. Then I want you to meditate for an hour and to finish at least 5 laps around the meadow." Issei did not see anything complicated in doing what the dragon said, so without wasting time he started with the routine given by the soft dragon. A few hours later. "I'm done," gasped the black-haired man warned as he felt his body heavy. "Well done, brat. I see you found my trap, or not?" The dragon rested on a high stone while watching the young man train. "I lied. I thought that it would be something calm." Issei felt cheated because he had to repeat the same routine that the dragon gave him for hours until finally the sunset was seen. When the raven finished the routine, the dragon only told him that he didn't see the desire and forced the boy to do it again, and Issei, without understanding, did everything from the beginning. Once he finished again, he returned to the dragon, and it told him to do it one more time. The hours passed, and the boy just did the same thing over and over and over and over again until the sun was on its way to setting and giving way to night. At that moment, Issei felt like a fool for listening to the dragon without even questioning his orders for a moment. But at least it was just this once, the boy thought. But the dragon broke his illusion with the following words. "By the way, you have to repeat the same routine for at least 2 more weeks, and every day you have to put on weight and start meditating under the waterfall there. So get ready, brat. This will be very hard." The young man turned pale at his words, and letting out a loud Fukuda, the boy returned to his new home, hoping that tomorrow he could endure what was to come for him and his training routine. 2 weeks later. "I want to turn into a monkey," the unfortunate boy screamed, feeling like his arms were about to be torn off his body. "Stop complaining and continue, you're almost there," the dragon roared on his rock while he watched the training of the raven, who was trying to climb a large rock up the cliff connected to the waterfall, tied with ropes that were also tied to the room of the boy who was dying from this horrible training. Over the past 2 weeks, the boy was put to the test by various training methods that in themselves strengthened his physique, but the cost was the mobility of his body. As for the meditation, it was difficult at first because the current of the water threw him against the rock below him, but with effort he managed to overcome this adversity, and currently the young black-haired man was managing to climb the large headdress until after a few last pulls he managed to completely climb the large rock. "I did it," the black-haired boy celebrated his victory. "Great, now do the same with the other 19 rocks below." The boy turns pale at those words. "What did you expect? I never said it was just one." "I hate you," I comment dejectedly. "I love you too, Oscar. Now get to work." Hearing a shit from the boy, the aforementioned got to work again, feeling once again the sensation of almost losing his arms 19 times more. "Okay, I think you're ready for the next thing we'll do." The dragon spoke now about the tired Issei, who simply couldn't feel his arms, but knowing the reptile on top of him, he knew he wouldn't get a break at any time. Standing again, the boy waited for instructions on the next phase of training. The dragon perched on his shoulder and began to speak. "Very well, listen carefully. This time you have to try to form a sphere of my power in your right hand and then try to throw it against some object, and in this case it will be that tree over there." The young man looked at the tree in the distance and nodded. He closed his eyes and tried to accumulate power in his hand to form a sphere of said power, but without success. He tried a couple more times, managing to cover his hand with energy. It was not a sphere, but it was something at least. "I think that's the most I can do for the moment," the boy said, looking at his hand. "Well, it's not much, but it's progress. Now throw it." Looking at his target, the boy threw the handful of energy, with the only difference that instead of a ray it was a slash of white energy that came out of his hand and hit the tree, leaving a large cut in it that in just a minute the tree collapsed and fell. "Get out of here," the young man celebrated when he saw his achievement was small, but enough to make him feel proud of his progress. "It's ready," thought the light dragon when he saw that the boy made great progress in just 2 weeks. If his theory is not wrong, the years he suffered at the hands of his supposed family, the young raven's body had reached a kind of mutation same that helped heal his wounds, both physical and mental, and thanks to that mutation Issei is able to make great leaps in development depending on the limits of this mutation that the young man was not aware of. But if he were, how much could he endure? But leaving that aside for the moment, the dragon changed his attitude to a serious personality, and looked at the boy to give him some important news. Issei, for the first time the dragon called him by his name, and that surprised the aforementioned. "You are now ready to meet the second one," he announced, and the boy could not help but have goosebumps from the nerves. Who would it be this time? With doubt at first, the young man gathered his courage and asked. "The next one you are about to meet is, so to speak, my opposite. I am light, but he represents my opposite, that is, darkness." The seriousness of the matter was clear in the dragon's voice, therefore, the young man took the matter seriously. "What is your name?" asked the black-haired man, mentally prepared to meet the creature. "He answers to the name Tananiver, and as I told you, he represents my opposite, therefore his power is almost similar to mine." Analyzing his words, the boy concluded that if the light killed nightmares, then darkness killed dreams. "So he can also nullify special abilities like you do, but in a different way." The dragon nods. "Good, I'm ready." With that said, the dragon returned to Issei's interior, and within a few seconds the young man's right arm began to give off a kind of black smoke that soon turned into a mist that completely blocked the young man's vision. As they moved away a little, the black mist took the form of a snake's body still covered by black smoke. At the top, 2 large horns emerged that were located in the area where the dragon's eyes should be, but apparently that would not be the case with this one. As the smoke dissipated, the dragon's body was now visible to Issei's sight, who now that he thought about it would have preferred it to remain covered by the black smoke because the dragon's appearance was more intimidating than the light dragon. The new dragon opened his mouth, letting steam out from within. Looking to his sides and using his nose to guide himself, the dragon descended until he was face to face with the young man who felt nervous in the presence of the knight. I present myself before you, human. The voice was as dark as his scales, but the young man remained firm in his presence. My name is Tananiver and I am the dragon that represents darkness. Politely, the dragon presented himself before the young novice. As you can see, I do not have eyes like you or any other living being, but I can still feel and see in a different way. I understand what you're trying to tell me. The young man knew some characters from series or movies who were capable of doing thousands of things even though they had a disability that wasn't enough to stop them. So you'll be the one who trained me with the other dragon. That's right, boy, Ryujin, and I will be the ones to train you from today. The dragon approached the boy, but first you must pass my test. What kind of test? The dragon sniffed around and from Issei's backpack he took out a piece of cloth that he placed in the raven's hands. Without expecting anything, Issei took the blindfold and covered his eyes, leaving him completely blind. Before you can continue you must see through the darkness, boy. The dragon landed above the boy and opened his mouth even more. You must feel the darkness, as if it were an extension of you. If you succeed you will pass the test, but if you fail you will try until you succeed. Without further ado, the dragon devoured the entire body of the raven-haired youth, who felt as if he were in outer space, floating towards nothingness. The boy held his head as he felt a strong pain that was killing him. A shower of bad memories passed in front of him again and again and again. It was a kind of psychological test that he had to overcome, but the pressure was so much that the young man's body, against the orders of his brain, fought to get out of that infinite void that surrounded him to the point of feeling how everything was shaking, and he could finally see the light once again. Did you really have to do it this way, Tananiver? Ryujin's annoyance could be felt when he saw his partner's method, who didn't give it much importance. Did you want me to train him or not? Tananiver asked his companion because he must first break all his chains if he wants to continue advancing. The light dragon sighed and looked at its bearer. Issei was on the ground covered in dragon slime and with his body shaking as if he had just come out of a pool of ice water. The tremors stopped when the boy fainted. The mental pressure was so much for him that his body did not know how to bear it, thus ending in his fainting. In the distance, the sound of footsteps between the two dragons became evident to the two dragons that it was invisible to the sight of any other living being in this world. The two dragons looked in the direction where the footsteps came from. Noticing the presence of a girl with blonde hair and amber eyes who showed concern on her face when she saw Issei lying on the ground, both dragons felt no hostility in the girl who was helping her fainted carrier. The two only became smaller until they were the size of a common snake and perched on the nearest rock observing the girl's actions. Days ago Ryujin had felt the presence of this girl, but seeing that she did nothing alone he ignored her. But he watched as the girl came every day to see how the boy trained in his day-to-day life, noticing the curiosity in her eyes and amusement at seeing how Issei complained to him. While this was happening in the distance, above the branches of the trees, two familiar presences were watching the girl and the fainted young man from afar. Anything to say, brother? Rumi asked as she sat on one of the branches of a tree, enjoying a carrot. Everything seems normal so far. My sister Leeson stopped looking through his binoculars to look at his sister. The boy doesn't seem to be someone hostile, and it seems that Kunu became fond of him in this last week. Do you think we should tell Yasaka something about this? Her brother shook his head. I thought so. I prefer not to take away the little childhood she has left. After all, being the daughter of a faction leader must be very stressful. Not to mention that advice from the elders that they will surely not hesitate to take advantage of when Lady Kunu is older. Lee Sin could feel his sister's growl, and he shared the same feeling as her. Both sisters continued with their work as protectors of the princess while she mentioned her still attending to the unconscious young man who was not aware of the actions of the girl who would possibly be a future friend or perhaps something more, but only fate knows that. While far from civilization. Is everyone ready? Asked a person covered in a dark cloak and wearing a mask on his face. If everything is ready and the dragon is ready to leave, sir, announced another man with the same style of dress as the previous one. The first man approached the creature, which roared in anger, but upon feeling the man's hand on its snout, the dragon lowered its head until it touched the rocky floor. In one movement, the man broke the chains that held the dragon, and as he pulled his hand away from the beast, the creature rose into the air, throwing a flame into the air. Fire dragon of the black earth, go to where that presence that threatens my plans is and eliminate it with everything that interferes with your mission. With a clear order, the dragon flew in the direction of civilization, ready to carry out his mission, while the man could only smile beneath his mask. Fate is cruel when it wants to be, and Issei's fate is no exception to this act. Chapter 2. Facing Fears and Death. Present night. A certain boy with bristly hair slowly woke up from his faint. He calmly raised his head and looked around, finding the two dragons sitting looking at the stars because it was already night time. "What happened?" the young man asked, bewildered. "You failed the test and fainted from the psychological impact of your bad memories." A brief summary came out of the blind dragon, and Issei sighed when he saw that he couldn't handle the challenge. "Do you want to try again?" "No," he answered simply and neutrally. "For today I just want to go and rest. Tomorrow I will try again, and this time I will pass the test." The dragon nodded and returned to the young man's interior while the white one just landed on his shoulder. "Don't be discouraged, boy. Nobody can handle a test like that on the first try. And besides, it wasn't Batman." The dragon encouraged the same boy, who let out a "ha" at that comment. "If you're right," the boy tried to remember the name of the same dragon that sighed. "I told you that you don't need to give me a name." "I know, but if I need to call you, I at least want to have an idea so I don't have to call every future dragon until I run into you." A reasonable excuse without fail. Every being or object needs a name to recognize and differentiate it, which is why people, when they adopt a dog or another type of pet, always give it a name so that the pet can recognize its owner or a person close to the aforementioned. In the case of the dragon, he just sighed and gave the green light to the boy to give him a name, a decent and respectful name, because if he came up with some bullshit like Licessida, Luke, or some other silly name, then the next training would be doomed for the young black-haired boy. Issei, after thinking about it, decided on one, and this name didn't sound bad at all. "So what do you think of Kaisel, the dragon of light and hope?" The dragon looked him in the eyes in an eternal silence that was only seconds and not millennia that passed until finally he spoke. "Not bad, it seems acceptable to me." Said and done, the dragon accepted his new name to the satisfaction of the young man, who now a little happier headed towards his home, but not before passing by a very important place for the boy. On the streets of Kyoto night. On his way home, Issei took a small detour and crossed the street to reach a house that had the shutters of the house closed without letting the interior of the building be seen. Issei stood in front of the door, and with just 2 knocks, the door opened slightly so that someone inside could look at him. "Oh ho ho ho, Issei, I see you came for your muscle pain medication," said the mysterious man, who collided with Issei days ago. "Good evening, Mr. Brooke, and I'll come for the medicine." With that said, the man behind the door unlocked it and welcomed the young man with black hair, who fearlessly entered the house. Just a week ago, the young Issei explored a little more of the city of Kyoto, accidentally finding the duo of mysterious men. Upon noticing Issei's muscle pain, the shorter one offered him some pills that would help him calm the muscle pain, and so it was, Issei felt like new and thanked the duo. From that day on, Issei comes to his clinic to buy said medicine and one or another that also helped him a lot to improve in his training. Of course, they were non-lethal medicines or with side effects. That was a stroke of luck for the dark-haired boy. With everything bagged and paid for, Issei took his leave, but not before leaving a gift for the duo. A small bag of candy that was well received by the two. Leaving the clinic, young Issei continued on his way back home, unaware that something bad was approaching at great speed. A big problem is coming, and Issei will have to fight with that problem if he wants to continue living another day on this earth. The next day, the sun rose and the young raven woke up. With a good breakfast, he said hello to a new day of training. Issei was determined to continue and overcome that test that the dark dragon had given him, which he nicknamed Bahamut, the reincarnated nightmare of the abyss, a name that he accepted without complaint, as did Kaiser. With everything ready in his backpack bought a week ago, the young man left through the front door of his home and headed towards the forest to continue with his errand at the request of the dragons. Note: I want to thank all the users who helped me name the Imagine Breaker dragons. I really appreciate it. End of note. As soon as morning came, it left giving way to afternoon. During the entire morning, the young black-haired boy spent his time training Kaiser's skills and also trying to overcome Bahamut's test, which by the way was difficult. In itself, avoiding fainting was impossible for him. Loading his mind to the limit of an explosive reaction was exhausting for the young man, but in the last attempts it seemed that he managed to stay standing, and that in itself was already an achievement. Your progress is admirable, brat. Keep going like this, and you'll be ready for more. Kaiser's praise encouraged the young man to continue with his routine, demonstrating a courage that he had never experienced in his life in Kyoto. Fortunately, you no longer faint when entering my mouth, which only means that you are one step and still a jump away from achieving it. Bahamut admitted that he respected the boy's enthusiasm since he arrived. He did not stop trying the test, leading him to be close to surpassing it. It's time to see if you're capable of making a power sphere on your own, boy. Get into position. Nodding at Kaiser's words, Issei stood in a firm stance and concentrated power in his fist. Complicated but not impossible, the energy flowed through the boy's body and soul until it reached his fist, which was covered by a white power until it completely covered his fist. When he opened his eyes, the young black-haired boy looked excitedly at the sphere the size of a soccer ball that covered his fist. For the dragons, that was unexpected because they did not expect the energy to reach that size. Without a doubt, the boy's accelerated development was surprising, and perhaps one day he could handle it being aware of it, but for now that was not the case. The next step was to throw it, targeting another tree in the distance. Issei concentrated and fired the sphere as if it were a kind of missile that was going towards its target. The sphere deviated to one side of its trajectory but undoubtedly hit its target on the right side of it. The tree finally fell due to the damage, but that doesn't matter. After all, there was no one around, or so the young man believed. Help! It was the cry for help from a female voice that alerted the young man. Issei looked at the dragons, noticing that they didn't know what was happening either, but when he heard another cry for help he didn't think twice and went in their direction to correct his mistake, being followed by the duo of dragons. Upon reaching the place where the tree fell, Issei was pleasantly surprised to find a girl with her foot trapped between the tree and a pair of rocks below, but what baffled the boy the most was seeing that the trapped girl had certain fox features that no other, normal, person would have. Kunu was distracted and did not notice Issei's presence until too late. In one of her attempts to get her foot out, Kunu looked to the side for a second, and when she realized something, she looked back to find Issei, who was looking at her confused and also surprised. Kunu had forgotten to hide her yukai features and quietly scolded herself for such carelessness on her part. On Issei's side, he didn't say anything. He didn't expect to find something like that in his life, but he put that aside and brought the girl closer. Kunu, seeing that the young man was approaching her, began to feel a little afraid because she didn't know what the boy could do, although she had helped him before. He didn't know. Her only option was to close her eyes expecting the worst, but instead she felt the opposite. Kunu opened her eyes only to see the raven-haired boy lift the log that held her foot. Not having that tied, the girl removed her foot, and Issei just threw the log back to the place where it fell, removing the dirt from his hands. The boy approached the girl again and checked her foot in search of any wound or inflammation in the affected area. "Are you okay?" he asked, earning a yes from the girl, much to the relief of the raven-haired boy. Sigh, what a relief. For a moment I thought the worst. But I'm glad you're okay, little one. The boy seemed relieved, but when he saw the girl's pout he knew he said something wrong that offended her. I said something wrong. Obviously you said something that offended me, Kunu exclaimed, standing up, surpassing the raven in height. For your information, I am almost a teenager, therefore you must respect me as a human. With her arms crossed and with an air of grandeur, a drop of sweat formed behind Issei's neck. Okay, whatever you say, girl. Upon hearing that, Kunu became more upset, to the point of seeing the strands of her tail twitching. You do know that the reason I call you girl is because I don't know your name, right? Kunu didn't say anything at that because it was true. Either of them cordially introduced themselves. With a cough to clear her throat, Kunu introduced herself to the boy, and Issei did the same, leaving the greeting and the awkwardness behind. The young raven-haired boy did a short but effective medical treatment on Kunu's foot before returning to his daily routine, leaving Kunu on a rock to prevent her from getting hurt by accident once again. For a while Kunu just watched him train, but there was a moment when the girl wondered what the boy's reason was for training so much, and she was more curious when she saw him fall to the floor while holding his head as if he was undergoing some kind of mental training or something like that. "Excuse me," Kunu said, drawing the young man's attention. "Sorry for interrupting, but I would like to know why you train so much every day." About that, Issei scratched his cheek, not knowing what answer to give her. After all, what he did was a task that the dragons gave him. He never thought of a reason to do it genuinely. "I guess it would just be to make me stronger, I think." "You think? Don't you have an ambition that you want to follow or something?" Kunu didn't believe Issei's words. Seriously, she was just training because if. "To be honest with you, I don't have any plans for the future. I just hope to live a quiet life away from problems," Issei confessed as he continued with his own thing. "What about you, Kunu? Don't you have any goals in your life?" Glancing at the girl, he noticed that she had lowered her head. "No, I only have a responsibility by inheritance." The girl hugged her knees, remembering her destiny, and Issei stopped training to see her. "Can I ask you a question, Issei?" "Sure, ask me whatever you want." Kunutoma took a seat, being below the girl due to the height of the rock where she was sitting. "If you were the son of a queen and your mother didn't pay attention to you because she was always busy, then what would you do to stop feeling like a burden?" Before that question, the raven had disconnected for a few moments. A fleeting memory flashed before him, the memory of his mother's face and the darkness that surrounded him at that moment. Unconscious of his actions, the boy squeezed his arm to the point of cutting off the flow of blood, leaving a purple mark when he came to, not feeling any pain. The boy thought about his answer. A case like that was complicated and he didn't feel capable of helping the girl with that matter. But nothing was lost if he tried, or at least making Kunu feel better would serve the same purpose. "Kunu, I called the attention of the aforementioned just out of curiosity. I want to know you are a princess, and that, queen, is your mother, right?" Kunu did not say anything, she just looked away, sending an indirect answer. "I will take that as a yes, and answering your question, I do not think your mother sees you as a hindrance." "You're just saying that to make me feel better." Kunu refused that answer, and Issei just stood up and stroked her head. "I'm not saying it for that reason." Kunu Issei was sincere with every word he said. "Maybe I'm not royalty, and maybe I don't fully understand this situation. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that your mother will, no matter what. Maybe if you talk to her before." He could continue. Kunu pulled her hand away in a somewhat abrupt manner. "No," she exclaimed in anger, to the boy's surprise. "Your words are just like the words of the rest. If my mother really loved me, she would leave her duties at least for a while and come to be with me, her only daughter. It's so bad to be somewhat capricious and want your mother's attention only for yourself." Kunu was shedding tears of pain, and Issei only felt worse seeing that Kunu's condition only worsened. "I'm sorry," he apologized with his gaze on the floor. "I just didn't know what to tell you. I never had this kind of experience with my mother." Kunu turned her back on him. "Please go, I want to be alone," the girl begged, and Issei wanted to stay, but that was not going to help. In the end, he just took his things and left, hearing Kunu's crying in the distance as she held her chest because of the pain in her heart. Shit, in anger he hit the nearest tree, leaving the shape of his fist clearly marked. "Don't take it out on nature, kid, at least you tried, and that's a lot." Kaiser appeared on his shoulder and tried to calm him down. "I still couldn't help but feel worse. Why aren't parents able to see their children's pain?" the boy asked himself without understanding that question, and Bahamut manifested on his other shoulder. "Sometimes adults are not able to see the damage they do to their children. They always prioritize that they have everything they need, and without knowing it they end up putting up walls that divide them. But sometimes there are adults who do not value their children until too late." Issei understood those words. He knew that not all parents were like his, and he had to accept that sometimes one cannot achieve what one wants. The young man simply sighed and left the place, heading to the supermarket to buy some things he needed for dinner that night, unaware that danger was closer than he thought. "Don't you think we should go and comfort her?" Mirko asked his brother, who just shook his head seriously. "Are we going to leave her like this?" "We can't do anything, Rumi. She doesn't want to listen to us, and it seems that only the boy can be heard by her." Lee Sin spoke, and the rabbit couldn't believe what she heard. "Are you really going to put the Yasaka and Kunu matter in the hands of a boy you don't even know?" Mirko admitted that he will never understand his brother's ideas. But what she didn't know was that her brother was watching more than she could see, wishing the best for the young man who was about to go through a life-changing event. Leaving the supermarket, the dark-skinned boy carried a shopping bag with the products he bought. With his spirits down, the young man headed towards his apartment, still keeping Kunu in mind and her expression of pain that only bothered the boy and his heart more. Damn, what can I do? I don't want things to stay like this. In his helplessness, the boy kicked a can into a dark alley that was next to him, but what he didn't expect was that the can would hit something, stopping his walk. Turning his head towards the alley, Issei was greeted by a pair of yellow eyes that looked at him as if he were prey. The steps of the owner of those eyes were heavy, and each step made the young man step back. In just 2 or 4 steps, the presence of that alley came to light, revealing its enormous appearance, which gave goosebumps to the unfortunate Issei, who only cursed his luck before the dragon that suffocated him with the smoke coming out of its jaws, which were in front of Issei's face. Guys, I need help. The first thing the young man did was ask for help from his 2 teachers, who looked at each other before nodding. Run/run, they both roared at the same time, and without thinking twice the young man obeyed the order, starting to run, only to hear the roar of the dragon a few seconds later that began to follow him on foot. Wait, why am I running? Am I not supposed to fight that thing? The boy asked as he dodged a swipe from the dragon, which destroyed a car that received the blow. Don't talk nonsense, Marion, you still don't have the strength to fight a dragon, Kaiser spoke from inside Issei, and the way he responded made clear his anger at the boy's idea. But wasn't I preparing for this type of situation with all the training I've been doing? Issei dodged a fireball that was headed straight for him, but luckily he managed to jump before dying. If you can't pass my mental test, then how can you expect to fight a dragon that's twice your size, no 3 times your size? Think it was Bahamut's turn to reprimand the boy for his stupidity. If he wasn't able to overcome his power, then it was clear that he couldn't fight the unknown dragon that was following them either. All that was left was to flee and pray for survival. As he fled, Issei noticed that the next street he was going to pass through had more pedestrians than the previous ones he passed. A fictional image of people running and a dragon destroying everything passed through his head. He couldn't let this dragon involve more people. With no other option, the boy turned to his right, being followed by the dragon. There was only one place where there were no people, one place where no one but him would get hurt, and that place was his private training area, that is, the forest. Running through the trees, the boy had reached the desolate clearing where he was training. From behind him, the trees could be heard collapsing, a clear sign that the dragon was approaching. The young man began to devise a plan to get out of there and confuse the dragon in order to escape, but as Issei continued to run, he could notice a person who was still there, and that was not well received by Issei because it completely ruined his strategy. Kunu, he shouted the name of the aforementioned, who took her head off her knees and looked at him, only to return to her place. Go away, I don't want to see you, Kunu said, refusing to talk to the boy now in front of her. There's no time for this, we have to go now. He didn't know how much time they had ahead of him. The young man just took the girl's hand and began to pull her to follow him. Let me go. Of course, Kunu didn't like the boy's action at all, and she broke free. I told you to go away because you came back, or are you going to come defend my mother? Without a doubt, the girl's personal problem clouded her judgment, and her current emotional state didn't help the boy to do anything either. Before they could do anything, a loud roar was heard not far from them. Issei turned pale, and Kunu was scared by the sudden roar of a dragon. Looking in the direction where the roar came from, both young people could see the dragon chasing Issei coming out from between the trees. At a slow but heavy pace, the dragon looked at the young people as possible dinners for tonight. Something that was not well seen by both of them, and more so by Issei, who in an attempt to protect Kunu stood in front of her, and with his arm outstretched began to move away with each step the dragon took. Issei knew that this thing was not going to let them go. Fear filled his mind and no idea came to mind. His alternatives were to fight or try to escape, but regardless of what, the boy would end up fighting against the huge reptile. But first there was Kunu, and there was only one way for at least one to be saved. Kunu, he called the attention of the girl, who looked at him. Listen to me carefully. I need you to run as fast as possible into the forest, and hide as deep as you can. While speaking, the boy closed his hand, forming a fist. But Issei, what will you do? Kunu didn't like the expression the boy had and feared the worst, hoping that the idea that was going through her head wasn't reality. He gritted his teeth, and without any more time to waste he began to run towards the dragon. I'm going to buy you all the time you need, so run. Kunu, with courage and above all fear, the black-haired boy went towards the dragon. Kunu did not expect the boy's sudden escape, but terror covered her heart, fearing the worst. The girl began to run towards the forest, not to flee but to look for two people who she knew well were following her even before leaving the castle which was her home, wishing that the boy would last as long as necessary until she arrived with help. The dragon looked bored at the boy's useless action. From his point of view he was like an ant or a puppy if he gave him that look, but out of pity for Issei he was not a threat. But those who truly were a threat to him were the two presences hiding among the trees. The dragon looked at the yokai running in that direction, knowing perfectly well the plan of these two. Before Issei could connect a blow, the dragon spread its wings and with the wind that rose it blew the boy back, who fell on his back because of it. When he opened his eyes he noticed that the dragon rose into the air and began to fly, not to flee but to attack who would be his first appetizer, and to the boy's horror it was not him but Kunu. It can't be, as best he could. He stood up and began to run as far as his legs could take him. Kunu, accelerate, she chose you first, the boy shouted to warn the girl, who stopped in confusion. As she turned her gaze, Kunu was paralyzed by fear. The dragon was approaching her, and because of its intimidating appearance, the girl couldn't help but freeze, just like a gazelle when it notices the presence of its natural predator. He opened his mouth ready to swallow the girl in one bite before the two hostile presences could stop him. The distance was clear that they were not going to arrive in time, and the dragon was going to end up winning. But there was an error in his calculations, and that was that he did not calculate the proximity of the boy, who ended up pushing the great dragon to one side, thus preventing him from swallowing Kunu in one bite. Issei wasn't going to arrive in time to save Kunu, so he used his head, and thanks to what he learned these weeks, the young man finally used his energy slashes as a boost, which allowed him to move much faster. He ran over a large rock that was at the point of the dragon's side, and using the most energy-charged boost, he launched himself like a cannonball, colliding with the dragon's side and pushing it away from Kunu. The girl, seeing the danger she was in, Issei was about to go help him, but a pair of hands lifted her up, preventing her from going to the boy's aid. "Where do you think you're going?" Kunu recognized the voice as Mirko, who was holding her in the air. "Rumi-chan?" Kunu herself was surprised at how little time it took the rabbit to arrive, but that was not important now. The important thing was, "Issei, let me go. I have to help Issei." "I'm sorry, but you're not going anywhere, especially if it's over there." Kunu, hearing that, began to struggle with the intention of freeing herself from Mirko's grip, but the rabbit was stronger than her, making it impossible. "Let me go, Issei," Kunu shouted, trying to go to where the boy was. Kunu refused to give up. She didn't want the boy to die, and even less knowing how badly she treated him a few hours ago. "Damn, you're so restless." Princess Mirko had to hug the girl tightly, but that didn't stop Kunu from continuing to fight. "Damn, is this boy that important to the princess?" the rabbit asked herself while the rumble was heard in the distance. Mirko looked in the direction where the boy and the dragon had gone. They could see the fire and the mounds of dirt rising like smoke. The rabbit knew she had to prioritize Kunu's safety, and the boy did the same, protecting the girl without knowing who she really was, or so she thought. Despite not knowing him, the rabbit's sense of duty demanded her to go there and help him, but also her sense as a guardian told her to protect the princess. It was a difficult decision for Rumi. "What are you waiting for, sister?" The third voice that both recognized was present. Lee Sin came down from the branches of the tree and looked at his sister. "Go, save him." "But brother and Kunu-sama?" Lee Sin, without saying anything, he took the girl in his arms. "I will stay and protect her. You go and make sure that boy comes out of that fight alive." Mirko looked into his brother's covered eyes. He knew that Mirko wanted to go and help, but her duty as a guardian prevented her from doing so, and for that sole reason she intervened. Mirko, without saying another word, nodded and began to run, and shortly after began to jump in the direction of where the boy was, leaving Lee Sin and Kunu behind. Lee Sin, before he could continue, the dark-haired boy shook his head, and that caused the girl, helpless from her actions, to start crying on the man's chest while hitting his chest in a way that Lee Sin felt as if they were tickles. "I'm not stopping you from helping them, princess. I'm just getting the boy to bring out his true potential." At those words, Kunu looked up at him. Even with that blindfold, somehow Kunu saw a great confidence, as if Lee Sin gave his full support to the boy he didn't know. The girl stopped fighting and looked where Mirko went, wishing the best to both of them, and waiting for the arrival of the first young man she could consider her friend. Not knowing what awaited the young man with jet black hair and a dark past. Chapter 3. Battle against the dragon. Current moment fight. Currently, the black-haired young man was in a fight against an unknown dragon who, without knowing his motives, attacked him with the clear intention of killing him. The unfortunate boy, wishing to survive, maintained the pace of the fight, evading each attack that the beast gave and avoiding the fangs that could destroy his body with a single bite. When Issei had the chance, he tried to hit him on the snout, but the dragon evaded him as if he knew what his plan was, which ended up frustrating the dark-haired boy when he saw that his strategy didn't work against the winged reptile, which sent him flying again with a flick of its tail as if he were garbage. Issei rolled on the ground, covering his body with dirt until he fell into a man-sized drainpipe. When he opened his eyes, he was greeted by a large number of white teeth belonging to the dragon that tried to devour him in one bite, but the walls of dirt were his momentary salvation. Issei noticed that the dragon was using its claws to remove the dirt, and knowing that his life was in danger, as if he were a caterpillar, he crawled out of that drainpipe before the dragon's mouth reached him. Even being on the ground, he tried to catch some air, but the dragon's claws prevented him from doing so. Rolling to his right, Issei avoided its claws, but seeing that it wasn't enough, he began to roll, avoiding each swipe of the beast and its bloodlust that made the unfortunate black-haired man's hair stand on end. During the shoot, the boy collided with a pile of raised earth, which made him finally get up to avoid the dragon's jaw that almost caught him. The boy took distance and tried to regain some air in his lungs. The dragon just looked at him and approached him at a slow pace. Damn that thing, it never gets tired. The black-haired man noticed something luminous in the winged reptile's mouth, and his senses screamed at him to jump, and he didn't hesitate to approach it, avoiding a blaze of burning fire. You're kidding me? Now it started spitting fire. He's an idiot dragon. It was more than clear that he was going to use fire. Stop complaining and run. Bahamut's scolding made him return to the game and avoid another flame that burned some hairs on his head. Issei continued dodging attack after attack, waiting for the moment when the dragon would run out of fire, which seemed to work, but forgetting for the moment that despite no longer throwing fire, he still had his claws and fangs, the same ones he used to make him bite the ground. In a moment of carelessness, the dragon took advantage and used its tail to upset the boy's balance, making him fall face down. Taking advantage of the fact that his back was in the air, the dragon captured him and locked him in its claws while it pressed and sank him into the ground. Agate was his moan as he felt his bones creak under the weight of the dragon's paw, who made sure not to give him a chance to escape. The scaly beast opened its mouth, letting strings of slime fall around and over the boy's head, who felt disgusted by being bathed by his captor's fluids. The dragon began to lower its head. Its intentions were clear, and Issei struggled to try to get out before he lost his mind. Each attempt led to the dragon sinking him further into the ground and supporting its weight more, letting the boy's spine suffer. Accepting defeat, the boy only hoped for a quick death, but his second life was far from over. Without warning, the pressure on his body vanished, the air entered his lungs again, and the pain diminished to a certain point. Standing again, the boy looked for the dragon, noticing that it was now far away from him, but another presence was present, and that presence was at his side. "Hey brat, are you okay?" the person asked the bewildered Issei, who nodded. "Well, I advise you to prepare yourself. That thing doesn't seem like it will like my kick." The dragon roared in anger as he looked at his attacker, who only gave him a mocking smile while raising his middle finger. The angry reptile charged at the two, where a rabbit was waiting for him and a nervous teenager who was cursing his luck as well. Mirko jumped up, dodging the dragon's claw, while Issei jumped to the side with his soul spilling out of his mouth as the dragon's claws nearly hit him. In the air, Mirko swooped down and landed a hard kick on the back of the dragon's neck. The force of the impact sent the dragon crashing into the ground, sinking its head into the dirt, but that didn't stop the dragon from using its sting to attack Mirko. But the rabbit held onto its tail and used it as support to spin around with the dragon's body and crash it into the ground again, much to the beast's annoyance. "I was expecting a better challenge, but you're not that great." Mirko got off the dragon and approached the raven, who was on the ground with his face in the dirt. "Hey, are you still alive or not, brat?" The rabbit lightly kicked Issei's body and he reacted quickly. "Huh!" The raven stood up suddenly when he noticed Mirko's gaze, who only gave the boy space to stand up. "What happened? We won?" The boy left and returned from limbo in a disoriented state, but for Mirko it was something funny to see and more so for what was said last time. Ha ha ha, we won. You brat are confusing me. I was the one who won. You just jumped here and there like a frog, but I give you some credit for lasting. Mirko crossed his arms after clearing things up with the black-haired boy who only scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed by his collaboration in the fight. Hee, I think you're right, miss. I didn't give much of myself against that thing, and it was obvious after all I'm just a mere human and not AA. The young man didn't know how to address the beautiful lady who was at his side, and Mirko just snorted at being called miss, and seeing the boy's attitude was like seeing a lost dog on the street. Look, let's keep it simple. Just call me Mirko and that's it. No, miss, or Mrs. Mirko. Okay, the teenager just nods at the direct attitude of the rabbit who didn't pay much attention to the boy's thoughts. While they were talking, the dragon's eyes opened, filled with anger. He waited for the moment of distraction of the two, and carefully positioning his forelegs, the dragon without warning launched itself against the duo who did not see the dragon's move coming. Mirko was going to give him another moon kick to finish off the reptile, but Issei's brain and instinct activated before Mirko's action. Without thinking, the young man pushed the rabbit with his arm, who was bewildered by the teenager's suicidal action. Time moved in slow motion, and Mirko's eyes witnessed how the dragon's teeth embedded themselves in the raven's arm, who grimaced in pain, and then saw the dragon's body rise into the air. Mirko tried to reach the tail and prevent it from flying, but the dragon saw his action coming and responded with a tail swipe that made the rabbit retreat, giving the dragon the advantage to rise into the air and fly away from the area where the rabbit was. Damn, was the exclamation of the brunette who began to chase the reptile on the ground, reaching where her brother and Kunu were. What's wrong, sister? Was the dark-skinned man's question. Where is Issei? Was Kunu's question, still distressed by the newly met teenager. Questions later, action now. Mirko passed by the two for their conjunction, but Lee Sin, sensing the young man's presence in the air, knew what Mirko was referring to, and without exchanging any more words, the Dragon Master followed his sister, still holding Kunu in his arms. With Issei and the dragon in the air. Being in the air, being carried in the least comfortable way possible, Issei, seeing his arm caught between the beast's fangs, thought of an escape plan. Looking down, he would notice that there were still trees below him and the beast, so his next idea would not be as painful as he imagined. Guys, be honest with me, I will live before putting the plan into action. The unfortunate man sought a vote of faith from his reptilian companions, who were very honest with their response. I doubt it very much, Kid Kaiser answered sincerely. I will remember you as a hero, and an attempt at it followed by the words of Bahamut, who gave his condolences to the boy. You don't know how much I hate you, the young man muttered in annoyance before clenching his fist with his available hand and staring into the dragon's eye, who also returned his gaze out of curiosity. Issei, without flinching or feeling fear, extended his fist, which was charged with some of Kaiser's energy, and without expecting anything, he connected a direct blow to the dragon's face, who, without understanding, felt his skin burn at the slightest contact with the human's fist that he had restrained. The hit area cracked as if it were glass or a mirror, which confused the dark-haired boy, who decided to deliver another blow to the same area, only this time the dragon's skin came off as if it were a layer of old paint, and the cracks in the skin spread further, causing pain to the beast, who in its agony released Issei's arm, and the young man fell headlong into the ground and the trees. When the dragon released the raven's bond, Issei tried to hold on to a tree branch, but the branch broke and his body continued forward, crashing into several trees and their branches until reaching the ground, where his body rolled in an attempt to cushion the forced descent, while holding his head with both hands to avoid damage or a possible brain contusion from the blows he received. With his body bruised, the boy stood up using a nearby tree for support. His body hurt quite a bit, but he was already used to the pain, so it wasn't difficult for him to walk and act as if nothing had happened, but in his descent into ignorance he couldn't avoid receiving a tail blow from the dragon that had also descended to the ground. The blow sent him to stop against another tree, and his back bent from the direct impact against the tree's bark. The dragon was furious, his eyes shining in a yellow tone almost close to gold. He opened his mouth, letting threads of saliva fall that only made his enormous teeth stand out. The area damaged by Issei's blows ended up falling apart, revealing part of his skull and without any trace of flesh under his skin. Issei, noticing that, looked at the dragon in confusion. How was it possible that that thing didn't have meat under its skin? It was impossible. But if that was the case, then that thing wasn't a dragon but rather a copy. If that thing isn't a dragon, then what is it? The young man spoke loudly, keeping his guard up for any movement of the reptile. Be like a boy, now you have a chance. Kaiser appeared on the shoulder of the young man, who listened attentively to the dragon's words. At first I said that you had no chance because I thought it was a real dragon, but seeing that this thing is just a cheap copy. Then things changed in our favor. The dragon's words brought some confidence to the teenager's heart. Now that you know, brat, don't waste any more time and finish off the bastard, Bahamut exclaimed while standing on the young man's other shoulder. With confidence soaring and determination rising, the boy once again clenched his fists, his eyes reflecting courage and his teeth clenched a little for what was to come. With his hair covering his eyes, the teen makes the first move and the dragon responds to the challenge. Issei, I will not run away from you again. The boy positioned himself to run. His eyes reflected determination, and in an outburst he marched quickly against the beast, which also launched itself at the boy. This time I will face you head on, and without hesitation again. With that battle roar, the one-on-one fight began. With Lee, Mirko and Kunu on the way to Issei's location. The Dragon Master carried the princess on his back while his sister took the lead in their race to catch up with the young hero, who saved Kunu, passing from one side to the other of the trees that surrounded them. The rabbit gave the details of what had happened moments ago, which led Lee Sin to scold Mirko for not taking his fight against the beast seriously, and Mirko reluctantly accepted his blame despite the fact that it was not a good time for his brother's scolding. That was all that happened. I'm sorry for my ignorance, and for trusting too much. Okay, I admit my guilt. Rumi accepted her irresponsibility with total confidence that her brother would leave her alone to concentrate on the current situation. For now we will leave the subject for later. But do not think that you will be saved from a reprimand. My sister Mirko only snorted at Lee Sin's words, but Kunu was the one who kept her mind fixed on the situation. Leave your fights for later, we must go save Issei. Kunu captured the boy's presence in the distance, and that gave the girl hope, but for the duo of brothers there were certain doubts about the relationship of the boy and the princess. Kunu, please explain to me something. What kind of relationship do you have with that boy if you barely know him, and I also want to know why you were in that area? Mirko questioned the girl, and Kunu knew that the rabbit was serious, and with a part of authority for being her guardian and loyal follower of her mother. Well, what happened was, wait a minute, how did they know I was there, and above all, how do they know about Issei? The girl noticed certain details that were not covered by a clear answer, but Mirko, to avoid drama, kept the main topic. Don't even think about changing the subject with unimportant things and talk now, or else I'll have to talk to Yasaka about your outings. Kunu turned pale at Mirko's warning, and although the rabbit didn't want to go to those extremes, she had no choice. I just wanted to be at peace for a while. Kunu lowered her gaze as she gave an answer to the rabbit's demand. Mirko didn't understand what she meant, but he did have a more or less idea of Kunu's emotions. Surely you wanted freedom to live before taking on your responsibilities as the future heiress of your clan, or am I wrong? Kunu the kitsune denied Lee Sin's denial, agreeing with the dark-haired man. I just wanted a place to be in peace without constantly having education classes and a bunch of people telling me what to do all the time. It's bad to want to be myself, and not the me they want me to be. In Kunu's words you could feel the girl's emotions, and how she really felt about the pressure they gave her. After all, she was still a child. Mirko and Lee Sin didn't say anything else. They knew that the girl's destiny was written the moment she was born, and the Council of Elders was going to decide everything on the authority of their leader. If only there was something they could do to change that, then they wouldn't do it without hesitation for the sake of the girl they considered a little sister. The trio continued on their way in search of the unfortunate boy who was fighting a fierce battle against the scaly beast that showed zero chance of winning. One would say that one would have to be a great idiot to think of facing such a creature, and without any weapon. But unfortunately for the boy they were looking for, he ended up being the idiot who was fighting with that beast. Returning to battle with Issei and the dragon. At the same time that the supernatural trio went to the rescue of the raven-haired boy, Issei was facing the dragon that longed to tear off the head of the black-haired teenager. In their clash of power, Issei took advantage of his size to slide under the beast and begin to leave a path of blows with his fists charged with the power of the imagined breaker. Each blow caused damage to the beast. Each blow cracked the dragon's skin, which felt each blow as if it were being stabbed consecutively. Another example would be having a sewing machine underneath being pricked by the needle of said machine constantly. The dragon stumbled on its legs in pain, and its body fell forward until it hit the trees near it. Issei got up from the ground covered in earth and dirt. He looked in the direction of the dragon, noticing that the giant was knocked down, and that made him smile. "I did it," he celebrated when he saw that his move had worked. The idea was sudden. He knew that he had no chance of a direct attack, but he did have a chance of an attack from below that could have ended in two ways. The first was success, and the second being crushed. Miraculously, it was the first that won, and that relieved him. "Don't celebrate yet, brat. That thing hasn't fallen yet," Bahamut warned, and his words were true, as the dragon stood up again. Issei thought about his next move, and his idea was to jump into a nearby pond, narrowly avoiding the dragon's surprise flame that tried to burn Issei by surprise. But the boy was faster, and saved himself from the water before the fire. Issei tried to get back to the surface, but as soon as he got out of the water he went back to the depths, avoiding the bite of the dragon that tried to catch him, blocking all chances for the boy and his oxygen. The situation was desperate, but Kaiser's words made Issei's focus of ideas turn on again. He hoped the dragon would try to bite him again, and when he put his head back in, the teenager clung to his neck. The dragon tried to free itself from the boy's grip, but the aforementioned had other plans. Taking advantage of his wet body, Issei slid down the reptile's neck as if it were a kind of slide. With his hands outstretched, he took the dragon's wings once under its neck, and with the help of the imagined breaker he managed to damage the wings of the stem, which, due to the loss of strength, the wings fell and disintegrated into dust. The dragon roared at the pain and the loss of its wings. In an act of anger he tried to bite the boy, but the teenager with courage gave him a punch in the face, and the same blow contained the imagined breaker, so the damaged part collapsed, revealing his skull. The boy foolishly believed that he had won, and, letting his guard down, he was bitten unawares by the reptile that waited for the right moment to finally reach the black-haired boy's shoulder. The sensation of pain pulsed through every inch of his body. His skin burned and the wind blew his face as he was thrown against the rocks beside the pond. As soon as his skin made contact with the cold water, the boy woke up with a grimace of pain. Getting out of the water, he grabbed the battered area in an attempt to stop the bleeding, but his action was useless and ended up staining his palm red. "Damn it," the boy muttered, suppressing his agony and standing up again. "Guys, any ideas, please?" "Telling you not to die is an idea?" Bahamut's question didn't help at all, and the dragon attacking didn't either. Dropping his body to the side, he evades the beast's blow, but turns around and tries to bite the teenager again, who in response hits the beast's face with his foot again. Holding on to a rock, Issei rolled, evading a claw, which gave the dark-haired boy the opportunity to hit him with his fist with a charged imagined breaker. The reptile's arm, as soon as it made contact with the imagined breaker, separated from the beast's body, which roared in pain. Without anything to stop it, the boy's fist continued straight until it hit the beast's chest. The dragon, upon feeling the touch, did not hesitate to hit and drive away its prey, taking distance from it. Issei, on his side with his head in a whirl, put his feet back on the ground, still holding his deep wound due to the pain. He looked at the dragon curiously, and noticing its defensive action, the boy looked curiously at the beast's action, as did the other two dragons that accompanied the raven. "Kaiser, Bahamut, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that thing covering itself?" Again the two dragons perch on the young man's shoulders and watch attentively the actions of the wingless reptile until they reach a conclusion. "A core is something that has a core instead of a heart." That information was given by Kaiser, who in just a second managed to reach a result. "I already said that something was wrong with that action of yours, so what do we do?" The young man recovered some of his strength after resting a little, and at the same time he thought of a way to finish off the creature. "The core is like a heart to him. Just use the imagined breaker against its heart, and that's it." Bahamut's idea sounded easy, but one thing is to say it, and another is to do it, and seeing how the dragon was, that plan was more complicated than it seemed, but there was nothing left to lose except his life, of course. The dragon for his part growled at any movement of the human. Underestimating him cost him dearly with the loss of his wings, arm and part of his face. The scaly being refused to give up because of his pride and also for fear of disappointing his creator, who would not hesitate to finish him off if he failed in his task. With those two things in mind, the beast refused to back down, and upon sensing the presence of three beings arriving at his location, he had no choice but to finish his business as soon as possible. As time went by, the beast was the one who decided to attack, running with its 3 legs. The reptile opened its mouth ready to swallow the raven, but Issei had another idea at the dragon's thought. Dropping his body down, he avoided the dragon's mouth, and with his left arm he pushed himself off the ground, and with his right arm he aimed at the dragon's chest. The beast, seeing the boy's intention, tried to move in the opposite direction, but that was also part of Issei's plan, who turned his body to gain momentum, and thus be able to accept a direct blow to the dragon's tail. The scaly being could feel his short life pass before his eyes and at the same time feel all the pain of his agony, the sensation of his prey's fist after passing his tail that turned to dust at the slightest contact of the energy that he guarded in the boy's fists. His chest was pierced, and the limb would invade formed its way until it reached his heart, which was exposed to the enemy energy, and its solid state began to crumble until finally exploding, killing the dragon with it, that lost all shine in its eyes, leaving only darkness. Issei gasped from the lack of oxygen. During his final attack, the young man held his breath until the beast's last breath while still keeping his fist inserted in the now dead beast's chest. But despite the tiredness, the young man felt happy thanks to his victory that he barely managed to win. "I did it right?" The boy didn't believe he won, because the last time he did it he ended up with a deep bone wound minutes ago. "Yes, boy, you did it. Good job." Kaiser was the first to congratulate the boy, followed by Bahamut's words. "Not bad, boy, not bad at all. Keep going like this and we can continue with your training without any problems." The words of both were a satisfaction for the boy, who could finally feel like a winner. The loud sound of footsteps stepping on the grass caught the dark-haired boy's attention. Issei looked up and noticed Kunu, accompanied by Mirko and the dark-skinned man carrying Kunu, approaching. Seeing Issei in the distance, the little girl extended her hands in greeting, feeling relief inside her when she saw that her friend was alive. Issei, without thinking, withdrew his arm from inside the dragon, believing that nothing would happen, but as he took the first step forward, a light illuminated the still vanished corpse of the dragon, and the raven noticed it too late, as did his danger sensor that failed to warn its bearer of the danger in time. The dragon's still undiscarded body lit up, and the explanation emerged, trapping the unfortunate boy, who couldn't think of anything in the face of the imminent surprise blow. Being so close, but on the verge of being caught by the explosion, the trio noticed the glow that the beast's corpse gave off, and seeing that the boy was still next to the corpse, fear invaded Kunu's heart, and Mirko along with Lee Sin sensed the worst. "Issei, be careful," was the exclamation to the princess, who extended her arm in a useless attempt to catch the boy, who was consumed by the fire in front of the eyes of the 3 present. "Brother," the rabbit looked at her brother, who got into a defensive stance. "Both of you behind me," the only man in the group ordered as his fists glowed gold. Mirko jumped and grabbed Kunu from Lee Sin's back. Using his own body, he further protected the princess, while Lee Sin put his arms in an X position, creating a shield that covered the 3 of them from the expansion blow of the explosion generated not far from the 3 of them. Shortly after, the explosion ended, and with it the expansion that lost strength with each passing second. When the danger was no longer present, Lee Sin released his shield and Mirko loosened her grip, allowing Kunu to separate from her. The girl did not hesitate and ran to the area of the source of the explosion generated by the dragon in search of the boy who saved her. Standing in front of the place where the battle was, the little princess only found a crater and ash inside, courtesy of the now dead dragon. The trees around the area were fallen and a few still in place. But Twisted, the girl, searched and searched for the young man, but there was no trace of the raven, only rocks and rubble around. The girl's legs lost strength and her knees went calloused. Lee Sin and Rumi approached closer to the area where the battle had taken place. Mirko looked at her brother, expecting a positive response, but the dark-haired boy's negative movement of the head destroyed her illusions. "Lee Sin, tell me you can at least feel something." The girl did not look at the martial artist when she asked the question. Her attention was fixed on the ash-covered ground rather than anything else around her. "I'm very sorry, princess, but I don't feel the young man's presence anywhere." Bitter words that only depressed the girl and her mood more. "Are you 100% sure?" The girl had a hard time believing in reality, and Mirko understood it. After all, she also went through that bad experience. "He was closer to the explosion, Kunu. If he was something more than an ordinary human, then he could have at least had a chance to survive. But the rabbit did not finish her dialogue. She did not want to ruin the girl's state anymore. The best option was to make Kunu stand up, and she would carry her on her back. It would be better to get out of here, she suggested. I agree. It's better to retreat. There's nothing we can do in our current situation. The Dragon Master turned around, being the one leading the way, followed by his sister, who only had a bad taste in her mouth at the boy's sad ending. Lee Sin walked silently to where his and Princess Kunu's home would be. On the way, the dark-haired boy meditated on the battle the boy had with the dragon. Although he was not there to see it, he had a slight idea of what could have happened in the battle until he reached the part of the explosion that supposedly led to the young man's death. The explosion was not as big as they believed. An explosion like that could not kill anyone, but it could seriously injure him, leaving him on the way to the first outcome. Lee Sin could only assume that the boy could somehow be alive, but with no traces of his presence or any clues, his doubt was questionable in his mind. He only chose to wait, and if he met the boy again, then it meant that this young man was not a common human, as Mirko mentioned before. With that doubt in their heads, the trio left the place, leaving the area desolate without any trace of life except for the mysterious bubbles that formed in the lake that was inside the battlefield. Inside the water, with Issei inside. With his consciousness about to sink into the abyss as his body sank into the depths of the pond, the young man with black hair and spiky hair looked for a few last seconds at the sky, covered in water. The raven's body did not respond to any order from his brain. He lacked strength, and blood that became one with the water weakened him with each passing second. His lungs filled with water, and his consciousness vanished along with his blood, accepting his end that ended with his death in the depths of the icy water. As the body of the unconscious Issei continued to descend, one of the rocky walls deep in the pond began to tremble until it opened into two kinds of doors that swallowed everything near them, including the body of the unconscious Issei, who, upon passing inside those two doors, the gate closed, taking the boy to who knows where. Leaving the question, will he survive? On the table of life. Unknown location far from Japan. Somewhere in the world, in a very low-class area of civilized society, inside a building that was a seedy bar. Inside it was 80% dark, with a few tables only letting in a gram of light from the few spotlights on the ceiling. On one of the few intact tables, a hooded figure was seen, wearing a mask that hid his face. The person was accompanied by other people who also wore robes that covered both their faces and their bodies. On the table, apart from the drinks and cocktails that the group had ordered, in the middle of the table there was a letter with the image of a certain dragon that had the mission of hunting a certain unfortunate young man. The letter, without any warning, cracked and was destroyed in just a second in front of the person wearing the mask, who smacked his tongue in disgust at seeing that his monster had failed in his mission. The dragon failed in its mission. Apparently it was a challenge to kill a mere human. That's what happens when you underestimate him, the person commented while removing the mask from his face. What a surprise. And I thought that a single dragon was enough to finish off a mere human who turns out to be a threat to our future plans. That must bother you quite a bit, Paradox. The person in front of the well-known Paradox spoke. By the tone of his comment he found his masters, complaint amusing. Paradox looked annoyed at the person who spoke, and in his way to release his annoyance he removed his robe, revealing his appearance and style of clothing. Silence, Vector. You couldn't complete your given mission either. The man noticed Vector's smile disappear at the memory that had gotten to him in a bad mood. Well, it was harder than I thought to avoid attracting the attention of unwanted people, and knowing that the current annoying Mao Leviathan managed to discover me was not one of my best days. The words referring to the certain demon had poison inside them. Just remembering the face of that woman annoyed him, although that negativity did not last long since Vector smiled again. Although she did not know who it was, that hitch could not beat me even if I do not use my secret weapon. His or and laughter only made him look darker than he currently looked. Don't even think about it, Vector. Paradox warned. The mere idea of you letting yourself get carried away by mere women involves exposing yourself, and I don't want our plans to be interrupted any more than they will be in the future. Sighing, the man looked at the other members at the table, waiting for the reports of what was mentioned. For our part, the mission was completed without any interruption, my lord. The chaos that will be unleashed in Kyoto will continue as planned, commented one of the three present who had not yet spoken. I trust your word, Gunham. I know you will assure me that those seals will be broken. Paradox sought perfection, and the aforementioned Gunham Tanaka assured it. My shadow power is superior to the power of those fox. Their seals are just mere papers before my power. One of the young man's eyes glowed red and a violet aura covered his body in emphasis of his greatness. So, tell me about the current strength of the Yasaka faction? The person next to Tanaka spoke, revealing his face under his robe. The current leader of the Yukai does not know about us, and her forces are strong, but not invincible. The forces of Kyoto will not be rivals for the army and subjects of King Yukai. I calculate that within a few days Kyoto will sink into chaos. The second of the three finished and fell silent, waiting for words from Paradox. Your skills and words are always good, Sung-ju. I hope you continue working just as well in the near future. Paradox's face showed signs of having a smile, but something went through his mind that erased all traces of that grimace. But still the boy lives, and according to your vision that boy will be a hindrance to us, or am I wrong? Sung-ju just nodded at Paradox's question, and that didn't encourage the man at all. Very rarely do I have the honor of seeing protections from the future, my lord, and the last ones I saw showed the boy and a varied group of beings fighting against our chaos. And there were also us being defeated by him and his people. The table fell silent after those words. None of those present wanted to believe Sung-ju's words. But even if they deny it, they feel that those words made sense. But someone chose to speak and end the gloomy silence that surrounded them because of Sung-ju's words. According to what you said, the brat was destined to die at their hands, but something altered that destiny and forged a new one that simply condemns us and also brings them to this war. The third and last member at the table was the last to speak, dropping his robe and revealing his appearance. That's right, 96. That boy managed to awaken something that altered the entire system, changing the destiny of all the people who crossed paths with him, including our destinies, without seeing or doing anything. Sung-ju responded to the words of the now well-known 96. Well, as far as we know, that power is probably not 100% polished yet. Therefore I suggest finishing off the boy before he learns to use it. Otherwise we will be in trouble in the future. 96's astral body rose a few meters from his place, and crossed his arms, waiting for the opinion of his allies, although he knew that everyone agreed with his words. Maybe I can help you, gentlemen. A new voice appeared in the place. The group did not react to the arrival of that person. The spotlight that illuminated it began to fail, as did the few that were still left. The song of a man resonated in the darkness, accompanied by loud noises of an axe cutting wood. In the bar, a few drunken diners were at the other tables. Before the darkness, none knew what was happening, but they did know that fear controlled their bodies, and without being able to do anything, the darkness consumed them, leaving their screams drowned by the song of the lumberjack cutting wood. The only seat that was still left at the group's table was occupied by darkness, where only two white earthen orbs were seen and a silhouette that was visible thanks to the light of a red lantern that carried a small white light that seemed to be about to go out at any breeze. Nobody told you that it's rude to listen to conversations secretly, or is it that you can't help it? Paradox took a full glass without looking at the person next to him, who only laughed at the blonde's ironic question. I apologize for my lack of education, but your talk caught my attention a lot, and also the power that boy you talk so much about possesses. Polite and respectable words were those that came out of the darkness that covered that happy silhouette, words that for any fool would easily fall for their deception. But not this group, who saw the truth through those false words. Are you interested, or is there something behind your words, beast? A question came out from 96, but the beast did not show any symptoms that reveal its truth. I'm just curious. That's all. The beast took a glass from the table and carried it into the darkness. The same shadow covered the outstretched hand that took the object, although it looks tempting to want to play a little. I hope it's not to your displeasure, or is it? Do whatever you want with him. Our priorities are different, and if you want him, he's all yours. Just make sure you kill him and don't interfere with our plans, so there won't be fights between us. In a neutral tone, Paradox threatened the dark being, and the beast just left the glass where it was. I do not intend to bother my saviors. You freed me from my seal, for which I am indebted to you, gentlemen. I assure you that I do not intend to interfere with your plans. The lights of the place began to work properly the moment the beast finished speaking. Standing up from his place, the darkness went away. We will see each other another time. With those last words, the darkness went away, and Paradox took his mask and stood up. There you go, gentlemen. The break is over. Time to go on your next missions. With that order, the group left the bar, leaving behind the empty plates and the oak trees that were where the diners of the establishment used to be. Walking through the alleys, the group disappeared into the night, continuing their advance through the steppes of chaos with the sole purpose of turning the human and supernatural world upside down. Cap 4. Meeting possible friendships. A look at the imagined breaker. Place? In a kind of tunnel connected by a large pipe, a person could be seen pressing buttons and moving two words that operated a kind of monorail made by expensive miners connected by chains. The function was simple: press a button and pull a lever. Those two actions made the gate connected to the wall open and let out what would be garbage for anyone, but for this person, it wasn't, or at least for his boss it wasn't garbage what he extracted from the pond outside. Filling the fourth car, he moved on to the fifth to fill it, pressed a button and pulled the lever, but instead of opening the gate, it only showed an error on the control screen, which surprised the person, who did not take long to go and check the gate, which seemed to be stuck with something that was obstructing the passage to the garbage. The person decided to hit the wall and the door opened, letting out its contents, but upon doing so the person noticed something peculiar that was hidden by the empty garbage bags. The subject removed the bags and found something that was not garbage but rather a person. Issei felt the light in his face, which caused him to open his eyes, and when he did so he only noticed the silhouette of the person who was looking at him. He only remained conscious for a few seconds before fainting again due to lack of blood. The person did not know what to do about the unknown to him. Choosing to ask someone else instead, the subject took the unconscious Issei and left the place, but not before sending the mining carts to their next destination. A few moments later, 20 minutes. The person would arrive at a different place than where he was before. The place was adorned by mountains of garbage perfectly placed in square shapes which formed beautiful buildings made of waste. The subject walked around the piles of garbage made up of all kinds of thrown and wasted objects with scrap metal, old editing debris and torn garbage bags. Coming to a clearing of everything mentioned, the person left the unconscious Issei on a table and approached the person he was looking for, who was on top of what would be a giant robot. "Hey boss," I called the aforementioned one. I couldn't hear him. Little boss, no answer yet. Gargle, he got an answer the third time. What the aforementioned left what he was doing and went down a kind of elevator. "Don't you see that I'm busy, Blitzman? My time is essential to me." "I know, you tell me that every time I interrupt you and then you demand that I leave." It was a short list of the routine they did normally. "If you know that, then why the hell do you keep bothering me?" Gargles didn't seem to be the best person with a Buddha-like patience that could be said. "I just wanted to ask you one question." Gargle sighed and calmed down, waiting for his assistant to ask where is the first aid kit. Snort, ask Vali the guard about the things that don't interest me. With an answer given, Gargles went back to his business, leaving his assistant pleased. Thanks Gargles, I knew he was a good person. Happy with the support of his boss, Blitzman left, but not before taking the fainted Issei in his arms. Gargle paid no attention to him once he picked up the soldering iron and continued with his work, but as he briefly recalled his assistant's question, something struck him as odd. Wait, why does a robot need a first aid kit? Gargle left his work again and went down to find his assistant, to find out why. Walking through the pillars of filth, Blitzman would find what he was looking for: a hospital stretcher. With a single pull he removed the stretcher and put it together, leaving the body of the unconscious boy there. He headed inside a small, somewhat damaged tent and took a white box with a red X, believing that it was what he was looking for, and as he was about to leave he would be stopped by someone who grabbed him by the leg. Huh! Turning around in search of his break, Blitzman looked down to find a small robot staring at him. "Oh, it's you, Wally. Sorry for not noticing you when you came in here," he greeted his friend and companion, who made a "no problem" gesture to his colleague. "Listen friend, I need you to lend me this to help someone who needs repairs." "No problem there, really." Blitzman hoped not to have problems with Wally, but the aforementioned robot only took the box from him and put it where he was, making Blitzman sigh, making him think that maybe his little friend was not going to cooperate. But Wally broke his friend's illusion when he gave him another box, this time containing the medical equipment he was looking for. Blitzman looked at this in surprise, and Wally just gave him a smile before leaving the tent to continue with his assigned work. "Thanks for your help, Wally wouldn't know what to do without you. Happy with his luck, the big guy left the tent ready to help the human lying on the stretcher. But upon leaving he would find someone who seemed not to be very happy with what he saw. Soups. You have 5 to explain this to me, or I will dismantle you right now. Gargles with his arms crossed, waiting for an explanation from his creation, a non-gay explanation. In the middle of all the piles of scrap was the hospital bed, which was being occupied by the inconvenient Issei, who in a few seconds began to show signs of recovery thanks to the medical treatment he received from the 2 people who were near him, managing to more or less hear their conversation while he struggled to regain consciousness. The happy conversation was between Gargles and Blitzman, who explained how he found the raven and how he ended up in this situation with the young man. Gargles for his part did not take it lightly, as one could say the explanation of his creation, who hoped not to be dismantled after this. "Are you an idiot or a piece of junk?" was the insult that Gargles let out after Blitzman fell silent. "I'm sorry, but I didn't know what to do with him, and you told me to bring all the material I could find." It was Blitzman's defense, because as far as he knew he didn't do anything wrong, but Gargles didn't see it that way. By remains I mean technology, pieces of metal or even garbage bags, that kind of remains I mean, not a dying human body. In his outburst, Gargle threw a broken cup at Blitzman's face, who felt nothing at that blow. "Okay, I got it. Next time be more specific. Don't you remember that part of my brain is from an old phone?" With his arms crossed, the robot turned his back on his creator, and Gargles sighed at his annoyance. "You know what? I won't waste my time arguing about your stupidity. Just leave him in one of the piles of garbage, and when he starts to stink, throw him in the oven. At least his body will be useful to keep the heat on." Choosing to leave, Gargles gave the order, and Blitzman obeyed. He took the boy's body and approached one of the many piles of garbage. "It's too much to ask just once that you don't be so mean to me. It's too much for that selfish fool." Murmurs were what came out of Blitzman's mouth before he carelessly threw Issei's body, and at the impact against the cold and hard steel the young man reacted negatively to the pain. That hurt. The momentum made the young man jump to his feet and then get out of the pile of garbage while trying to suppress his back pain. Being more or less recovered, the young man was finally able to see his surroundings and also those around him, finally noticing the 2 people who were looking at him from head to toe, and that made the young man somewhat nervous, who did not expect to attract attention. This hello nervous greeting without having the slightest idea of what to do in this situation. Gargle and Blitzman didn't know what to say, except Gargle, who went from being surprised to annoyed, because in front of him was what many would call an intruder, the same one that his helper brought inside his home, exposing his location and also exposing everything of value to Gargle. "Hey," looking ugly at Blitzman, "wasn't this human supposed to be dead?" Blitzman scratched his neck at his master and creator's question, thinking of an answer that would avoid Gargle's imminent anger. "Well, technically you said he was dying when you asked me for an explanation, so you were the one who assumed that." Blitzman expected any blow, and did well to cover his head, as Gargle hit him with a large wrench. "But you're so stubborn. Just because he doesn't move doesn't automatically mean he's dead, and how dare you say I was wrong?" Gargles was quite irritated to the point of hitting Blitzman with any object he had at hand. "Why do you always react like that?" "I was just doing my job." The robot struggled to get the amphibian off of him, but his grip was quite strong. Issei, who was a simple spectator in the background, watched the scene without knowing what to say or do. The young man was already quite confused and full of questions that he simply did not know how to answer. How did he get there? What place was this? And he also wondered if Kunu was okay. With that whirlwind in his head, the young man preferred to silently retreat from the scene in search of a way out of the place. But when he turned his back to both of them, a screwdriver passed by the young man and stuck itself into one of the piles of garbage. With goosebumps at what he witnessed, the young man returned his attention to the duo, being aware that both of them were looking at him. "And where do you think you're going? This fight was started by your human," was the amphibian's exclamation, while he was still wrestling with Blitzman, who fortunately managed to free himself from Gargle Dam. Being about to hit Blitzman again, Gargles glanced at the human before hitting his creation, and as soon as he saw him he stopped because something caught his attention. Stopping his outburst against Blitzman, Gargles looked in detail at the boy in front of him, who felt somewhat uncomfortable being stared at. "Is something wrong?" Blitzman noticed that Gargles was watching the human, and the amphibian only wondered one thing. Wasn't he about to die when we gave this human medical treatment? Blitzmon confirmed that he was. Then why does it seem like nothing happened? Without any warning, Issei's body lost its strength and collapsed on the floor. The pain once again invaded his interior, and the memories of the event he experienced previously passed through his head, generating pain in his brain. Blitzmon left Gargle in a month and went to assist the boy who seemed to be having a bad time at that moment. Are you okay? Blitzmon stood at his height and helped him stand up while Issei only held his head, being seen by Gargle, who was not affected by what he saw. Yes, I think so. Standing again, the boy held his head due to the migraine that tormented him. What's wrong with him now? Does he have shit in his head? Gargle showed no empathy for Issei's pain, but Blitzmon did. We must help him, Gargle. No thanks, was his answer. I'm not going to waste my time saving the life of an unknown human, and besides, I already wasted a lot of time yelling at you. He turned around ready to leave, but Blitzmon angrily sat the young man on a nearby chair and approached his creation. Please, Gargle can't leave him like this. What if his life is in danger, was Blitzman's argument. But Gargle didn't seem to agree with his machine's emotions. I already told you, Blitzmon, I'm not interested in saving this human's life if I don't get something in return for my services. They are business, not charity. Gargle's eyes glowed red, making his point clear. I know, but for this time you can make an exception, my friend. Do it for me. Yes. Gargles held his mind as if he was thinking about the words of his machine. You know that my knowledge is limited by my internal damage, and you are the most intelligent being that exists in the world. Using the tactic of flattery, Blitzmon hoped that Gargles would fall in his move while Issei still had his headache. Gargle just looked at his friend, still remaining neutral about the aforementioned request. The amphibian knew that Blitzmon used flattery to manipulate him, which didn't happen to him, but Gargle wasn't as selfish as he wanted to appear, leading him to let out a sigh. Gargle rubbed his head with his fingers and turned to see the duo who were waiting for an answer from the amphibian, who, snorting, agreed to help but reluctantly. You better get that idiot human back on that stretcher when I get back with the most up-to-date medical equipment. Exclaiming those words before leaving, Blitzmon thanked him for the help before watching Gargle leave. Carefully taking Issei, he laid him back down on the stretcher where he was lying before, while Gargle was quick to return with a pack full of improvised medical equipment for emergency situations. In the words of the amphibian, he was a genius of science and not a doctor, therefore his methods were not as gentle as a normal doctor, and he demonstrated this when without warning he threw a medical tactic at the unfortunate Issei's head that almost managed to knock him out from the impact. Blitzmon looked annoyed at Gargle for what he did, but the aforementioned ignored him and got on the stretcher where the boy was while still feeling Blitzman's gaze. What? We don't have anesthesia. It was better that he was knocked out so I wouldn't have to listen to him moaning about his headaches. Although he tried to appear neutral, Gargle's voice was somewhat amused by what he did. Damn, that blow didn't knock him out. Quickly use the Sprague, Gargles ordered. Blitzmon would quickly take out a Sprague from the medical box. What an impact on Issei's head and aim at Issei. But when he pressed the Sprague, not even gas came out of the can. Not there anymore, Blitzmon announced. Then use the wand of forgetfulness, he suggested, the second, less gentle option. Of course, without thinking, he took out a bat and hit the object in the face of the black-haired boy. Gargles moved a little closer to the unconscious Issei's face so that he could gracefully comment on something funny to him. Just look at him, isn't he cute? His comment was sarcastic and funny, due to the foolish face of the unfortunate young man. Well, let's not waste any more of my valuable time working. I don't get paid to knock people out. Said and done, both of them got to work on their sleeping patient. Change of scene. Location outside Kyoto. In the far reaches of the famous city of Kyoto, on a mysterious island that is not recorded on any map of the world, inside a cave of said unknown islands, darkness was the only thing visible inside. But if one looked closely and in detail, one would notice a slight flourishing light that stood out deep within. This light came from a pillar that reached to the top of the interior of the cave, with a Japanese altar in front of it, and being covered by seals written in ink and blood. Large chains held the pillar, with each one embedded in the rocky walls that surrounded it, as well as the pillar. The chains and walls were covered by the same seals that covered the smooth, grayish pillar. Everything mentioned covered the cave as if there was something so dangerous and deadly that those who did everything to seal the being inside the pillar made sure to avoid at all costs that whatever was there would never come out in life, or well, that should be the case if it weren't for the current scene that was seen. The pillar was intact, but its surroundings were another story. The seals that covered the entire interior had been torn off, cut and stained, losing all their power. The chains were in pieces as if something or someone with monstrous force had hit them until they were in poor condition, and the altar was nothing more than wooden remains of what it once was. While the whole place looked like a scene of vandalism, the pillar in the center began to show different symptoms than it once showed. The center cracked and began a path of destruction thanks to the crack that only spread further and further. The remains of the seal at the slightest touch or brush with the cracks burned in a single second. The pillar began to tremble once the cracks covered it completely, taking only a few seconds before collapsing, revealing a dazzling violet light coming from a seal sunk into the ground. Inside, a throne could be seen, which was occupied by a person, who was resting lazily with his head resting on his arm, also with his eyes closed as if he were sleeping. Another presence appears in front of the throne and said being prostrates itself before the person who was sleeping in the aforementioned seat. My lord and master, the seal was attacked and weakened by someone unknown, which means that the time of your reign has come. It was the information given by the person in front of his king, and the emotion was noticeable in his voice. The aforementioned king moved his head slightly, allowing his eyes to open, revealing two amethyst-colored orbs that anyone who saw them would say were like two stars that you would only be able to see 100 years later. The king smiled slightly at the news, perfectly hiding his emotion. So the seal was weakened after many years. How the informant nods at his lord's words. Excellent. After so much time we can finally finish what started, but it is still too soon to leave, so inform the other subjects to prepare for when the seal is broken. It was the king's order, and the informant nodded to leave with his new order given. The king, unseen, took something out from his clothes, revealing a family photo of him and his family. The king smiled gently when he saw his wife's face, but said smile went from gentle to malicious when he focused his attention on the face of his newborn daughter in the arms of his wife. If you thought that I would give up on you and get away from my daughter, well, you were wrong, Isaka, because once I get out of here and go to the Yukai kingdom with my army, there will be a carnage that no one will be able to stop. Everything burned in purple fire, and the king returned to his dream, still having his dark smile that wished only pain to anyone who opposed his reign. In Yukai territory leader's castle. Inside the supernatural territory, the trio of Lee Sin, Rumi, and Princess Kunu were on their way to the palace where the mini kitsune lived. On the way home, Kunu remained silent, remembering the boy and his noble sacrifice that led to his death. Mirko, while carrying Kunu, treated the girl like an animal, but all her attempts were in vain, and that frustrated the rabbit while her brother continued to lead the way into the palace, passing through the main gate. Once inside, after being greeted by the entrance guards, two palace maids were waiting for them next to the door, politely greeting both the brothers and the princess, who only returned the greeting with a fake smile before heading to her room. However, upon touching the first step, the princess turned around and asked about a certain special person for her. Excuse me, the princess called the attention of the helpful duo who were already expecting that question from the girl. I want to know if my mother will have dinner with me tonight or not? Although it was not noticeable on her face, Kunu expected a positive response from the duo, but seeing that they only looked at the floor and not at her eyes, Kunu knew the answer. I'm sorry, Kunu-sama, but Yasaka-sama will be busy until very late today and tomorrow. The maids were unable to look the princess in the eyes because they were the bearers of bad news for the girl. And that was fortunate for them in a certain way, since they did not witness the treacherous tears that escaped from the girl's eyes, being seen only by the brothers who could not say anything to avoid that bad moment for the girl. I understand was the only thing she managed to say, avoiding the stuttering and the desire to cry at that moment. Well, if you need me, I'll be in my room. No, let's see. With her last words said, the girl went to her room at a half-fast pace, but not exaggerated, to avoid her crying, the same that she released once she passed through the threshold of her room, closing the door behind her. Both maids said goodbye to the brothers and left with a bad taste in their mouths, leaving Lee alone without Mirko. The rabbit sighed, frustrated by what had happened, and looked sideways at her brother. She waited for some response from him, but the dark-haired man only remained silent and maintained a serious expression. And what's happening to you now? You've been very quiet since we arrived. Mirko moved forward at the same pace as Lee Sin when he began to walk away from the entrance door. It's nothing important to worry about. Sister Mirko didn't believe her, and Lee Sin just sighed. It's just a bad feeling I feel, one that involves the future of this faction and everyone who lives here. Continuing his way through the corridors that connected to the courtyard, it was Mirko's turn to speak. Your bad feeling has to do with the boy from before? The image of the young man passed through the brunette's mind as well as the memory of his death. He is supposed to be dead already because you keep thinking about Lee Sin. He was a normal boy who was not able to survive an explosion of that magnitude. Mirko put his hands behind his head on his way to his brother. A normal boy who was able to defeat a dragon that surpassed him in power and strength. Where do you see the normal in that, sister? Mirko was speechless, forgetting those details that she did not witness in the battle. That boy was not normal, and you know it. Sigh, you're so annoying with this subject. Lee Sin. Mirko was already somewhat irritated by her brother's stubbornness on that matter. Without a doubt that brat must have left a good impression that she didn't notice. For her brother to continue with the matter, I suppose that if the boy turns out to be alive, you will make him your disciple, or am I dodging the matter? If he agrees, then yes. But if he doesn't want to, I'll understand. I'll just make sure he controls his power well so that he becomes a good ally for this faction that is about to enter an era of war. The last thing only made Mirko sigh, who only thought that his brother was exaggerating. I don't know what you see in that boy. To me, he was just a weak, talentless weakling with a little guts. The rabbit remembered the battle and the scene of him saving her from the dragon. Maybe you see a weak and talentless puppy, but if you raise and train him with determination, he can become a fierce and talented wolf. A slight smile formed on Lee Sin's lips, and Mirko just clicked his tongue at his brother's words. They both continued on their way without exchanging any more words, each with their own ideas, internally preparing for whatever was to come. In an unknown place, mind of Issei was lying in the void unconscious. Opening his eyes, the unfortunate boy stood up in search of an answer about his current location, believing himself to be in an unknown place without knowing that this place was the interior of his conscious. Walking in a straight line, the young man found himself in a blank space that was not deserted but rather inhabited by a huge mountain that covered half of the white land. How did I get here? He asked himself, and when he remembered the Wand of Oblivion, Issei's head buzzed. I remembered now. The young man without options analyzed the mountain, noticing that it had 9 caves and each cave was very different from the other. It was as if whoever lived inside had their own personalized cave. Taking as an example the first one closest to the ground, this cave seemed the most normal, unlike the second one that looked like something out of a horror movie with its gloomy tones, dead plants, and rocks the same color as coal with some bones from both animals and humans, which gives the unfortunate Issei a chill. Moving away to avoid the discomfort of that cave, the boy's attention moved to the next cave. The temperature was high, causing the boy to sweat due to the heat of the embers given off by the hottest cave he saw. The volcanic rocks and the river of lava gave good lighting. But despite the burning stones around, the interior of the cave was still dark. The young man clumsily got too close and the waves of lava collided with the rocks, causing a burning splash that almost burned the boy's foot by millimeters, making him step back. I'd better keep my distance from that cave or I'll end up burned to ashes. Mentubo distanced himself and looked at the different caves that followed after that one. The next cave was the opposite. Instead of lava and fire, there was water and peace, the opposite of the previous one, adorned with a waterfall and several ponds where fish lived like marine plants that you find in the depths of the sea. Being anyone, one would come closer to see better. But knowing his luck and the experience in his life, the young man did not move from his place, knowing well that not everything was as it seemed. It's a nice place and anyone would come closer to get a better look, but my instinct warns me of the danger, and I'm not going to ignore it. Passing by, he went to see the next cave, this being the 5th one. Due to a draft, the young man hugged himself in search of warmth due to the sudden drop in temperature generated by the cave in front of him. The place was covered in ice, including the cave, which was also made of it, adorned with ice peaks, snow, and prehistoric fossils bathed in sub-zero temperatures. The boy knew that if he stayed there he would end up sick or worse, dead, so he left before it was too late. It's better to run away than to be a popsicle. Arriving at the last caves that were closer to each other with different locations, the unfortunate Issei took the time to analyze and look closely at each of the 3. The sixth cave was more natural, so to speak. It was covered with different types of plants that could be found in the savannah. The floor was covered by many types of flowers of different colors and sizes. The environment it gave was quite pleasant for the jet. But he knew that everything good always brings something bad, so he preferred to see the last two that were left. The seventh was literally a destroyed power plant. Rubble and metal beams could be seen around the place, with an electrical tower on top covered again in black that flashed thunder and lit up the skies. The last and eighth cave resembled heaven itself due to the angelic touches in the environment that surrounded it, and the rocks that formed the cave were white and pure with a small light illuminating them. The floor was covered by clouds, and its environment made one believe that it was the Lord's own paradise. Once he analyzed the 8 caves, the boy noticed that there was a 9th cave. Curious, he tried to get closer to see it better, but it did not turn out as he wanted. The cave was at the top, making it impossible for him to see it clearly. The boy gave up and returned to the beginning of the mountain where the first cave was. Issei tried to look for a clue as to how to return to reality, and the first cave could maybe help him, poking his head inside. The boy made sure that there was no danger, and being about to enter the ground where he was standing began to shake, causing the young man to back away until he left the cave, and as he could he grabbed onto the first thing that was nearby to avoid falling face first into the ground. The shaking stopped, and the boy finally stopped shaking. He looked up and noticed 2 familiar faces who were in charge of helping him get on with his life instead of trying to commit suicide again on some other bridge. "I'm glad to see you again," the young man spoke honestly to the duo, who thanked him for his words. "We too, brat. But unfortunately time is limited, so there is no time to have tea and talk," were Bahamut's words to the boy, who just kept quiet and paid attention to the words of both of them. "Well, let's start with the basics. First, you're not dead, just unconscious, boy." The young man confirmed that he already knew that. "Okay. The second thing I want to tell you is that the connection you had with the other dragons was cut off. We don't know why, but with the exception of both me and Bahamut, we're the only ones still connected to you." The boy showed surprise at this revelation, and before he could ask a question, Bahamut took the floor. "We don't know why, but we assume that the explosion had something to do with your disconnection with them, therefore you must recover your connection with them, which is a complicated thing to do." Bahamut did not beat around the bush, and the black-haired man accepted it harshly, to his bad luck. "How do I do that?" the boy exclaimed, somewhat discouraged, but not defeated. "Well, to start with, they think you are not worthy of their power, so you don't plan on helping them." The difficulty level was difficult for the boy, but Kaiser was the next to speak. "But if you show them that you are not a soft in the not-too-distant future, then they will see your potential and accept you as the bearer of the imagined breaker. You just have to not give up under any circumstances, like you did for that little girl, boy." The memory of Kunu passed through the boy's mind, and a feeling of warmth warmed the boy's heart knowing that she was okay after all. Issei didn't have much faith in himself after his experience with the dragon before. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but if he didn't give up on such a beast, then why give up now? He already took a step. Now all that remains is to continue climbing until the end, and that determination was shown in his eyes, something that was noticed by the dragons, making the two remember their former carrier, which also brought back good memories for them. "Without a doubt he resembles him in several ways," Kaiser commented to his partner, who nodded. "He was a pain in the ass, but he was also good in his own way, and this brat is just like him." The comments of both caught the attention of the brunette, who wondered who was that him that the two dragons were talking about. "Hey, I don't want to interrupt, but who is this he you're talking about?" Confused and curious, the young man looked for an answer, and both dragons didn't see any harm in talking about that person. "We are referring to our old carrier boy. Your actions and way of thinking about others remind us of him." A fleeting memory passed through the minds of both Eastern reptiles. The figure of a 16-year-old boy with curly hair and a back that symbolized heroes brought a pleasant feeling to both mystical beings, added to a couple of pleasant memories for both. If you have confidence in yourself, and never give up on what you want, you can achieve whatever you set out to do, boy. Believe me, we witnessed that. Although Kaiser's words did encourage the young man, negative thoughts still lingered in his heart, leading him to wonder what he was thinking. "But what happens if I am not able to achieve my ambition? What happens if I fail?" The young man searched for that light that would help him guide himself in life, but the dragons did not allow that. "The path of life is not easy, Issei. It never is. These were the harsh words of Bahamut that affected the emotions of the young man in front of him. You cannot depend on a simple light of illusion to know what to do with your existence. Only you have the power to guide you and find your path. Whether good or bad, it will be your own path, and no one else. But what if I get lost and can never get back to the path I chose? What if I end up on another path? The surroundings began to shake and distort. What's going on? I'm afraid your time here is up, boy. It's time for you to leave. A blizzard blew and the air currents blew the young man back. Being the only one affected by the wind, we'll see each other another time, brat, and don't worry about the last thing you said. Bahamut, and I have faith that you will always do what you think is right. The wind pushed Issei into the darkness, taking him out of the subconscious and leaving the dragons on the scene. Do you have faith that he will be like that, boy? Both have the face of an idiot, but will they have the same balls to face injustice? Bahamut had his doubts despite the confidence he gave the boy, and Kaiser just laughed lightly. Believe it, Bahamut, that boy has potential. With a last exchange of words, the two returned to their respective caves, ending the conversation awaiting a response from the destiny of the boy who is currently carrying the imagined breaker out of the subconscious Bajiraro. Blitzman, are you sure he's not dead already? Gargles, since he finished his work, spent almost half an hour poking the unfortunate Issei's face with a branch that contained pigeon poop at the tip. This is the 5th time he asks me that, and he stops doing that. Blitzman took the branch away from Gargles to the annoyance of the amphibian. Besides, he's still breathing. Is that a sign that he's still alive, or did you forget? You tell me to forget something again, and I'll put your memory in a bucking toaster. Gargaras threatened, ready to launch himself at the boars with his robot, who was in position. But before they could start fighting again, the creaking sound coming from the hospital gurney caught the attention of both beings, noticing that their patient was waking up from his sleep, which was a relief for Blitzman and didn't give a damn about Gargle. But in the end, the boy woke up and sat on the gurney. Once seated, the young man held his forehead due to the pain he felt in that specific area without being able to remember why he was in pain. Holding his head, what happened to me? The black-haired boy looked at the duo, waiting for an answer that would solve the mystery. Oh, nothing, just a kid flew over us and blew up a car with his laser beam and hit your head in the process, was Gargle's response, and that only confused the boy more. What thing? The young man was more lost than before, and Blitzman went to his rescue. You just slept for a while and we healed your wounds, and a toaster hit your head. The robot's words managed to convince the boy, who nodded in response. Well, I guess thanks for the help, the black man sincerely thanked. Well, it's a disappointment that he's not dead, but I guess it's also a miracle that he's awake, Gargles commented at the moment, and since you're back to being human, get out, he exclaimed his last sentence in a shout. Gargling was doing his thing, and Issei simply assumed that he was no longer welcome there, so he decided to leave. Checking his body, the boy noticed the bandages around his body, and for some reason the boy decided to take off the bandages before Blitzman's gaze, who held the young man's hand, stopping his action. Wait, what are you doing? Blitzman saw the bandages loosen their grip, exposing the young man's abdomen, and to the robot's surprise, all the young man's wounds were gone. Issei stopped feeling the pain in his head as well as no longer feeling fatigue in his body. Doing a test, Issei stood up, and as a result he felt nothing except the tip of a badly nailed nail, but apart from that he felt nothing at all. With the certainty of not having any wounds or internal damage, the young man looked directly into Blitzman's eyes to ask him a question. Excuse me, can you guide me to the exit please? The young man asked, and Blitzman nodded, but still had his doubts about the boy. Yes, I can, but are you sure you're okay? I mean your wounds and the damage. If I'm honest, at first I felt like my body was in pieces, but now I don't feel anything, no tiredness, no pain. It's as if all that fatigue disappeared. The boy left the bands on the stretcher and waited for Blitzman's guidance. Issei's body was at 100%. It was as if all damage related to cuts, burns, bruises, bone fractures and bruises did not exist in it. In Issei's dark past he suffered various types of damage, both physically and mentally, from the most minimal to the most fatal. Despite his serious and minor injuries, the boy did not die to his misfortune but rather evolved in the face of misery, creating a metabolism that was in charge of healing all damage in his body without him realizing it. Blitzman guided the boy to the exit of the cave, and as he advanced, Gargle looked at him from a distance, analyzing him from top to bottom. After witnessing something that surpassed the average human, The amphibian felt his curiosity increase to the point of wanting to experiment with the boy. Experiments that will obviously put Issei's life at stake. Interesting, he thought to himself as he searched for parts for a future invention, which in his words would be a success. While Gargles was searching through the trash at a distance from the aforementioned one in one of the messy piles, a pair of curious little eyes could be seen that witnessed the whole scene from beginning to end, but staying in its hiding place, the small and jumping being returned to its hiding place in the shadows. Dalby is curious, but it is better to stay hidden or that reptile will come back to chase Dalby. The mysterious little one spoke among the garbage. Who called me a reptile? Gargles exclaimed in the air and with his weapons in his hand. With Issei and Blitzman way to the exit. In a walk of at least 10 minutes, Blitzman would stop his walk while standing on a steel platform. Issei, unaware of his surroundings, only followed the action of the robot while the aforementioned floor on a specific tile to activate a hidden button that activated the floor that began to rise as if it were some kind of elevator. I didn't know this was an elevator. I say that because, well, there aren't doors and all that. The young man tried to start a conversation while the elevator rose slowly at the pace of a turtle. Are we underground? Well, answering your first question, it is an elevator made from the remains of other elevators, and, regarding the second question, we are inside a fairly deep cave. Gargles made the ascent so as not to have to waste time climbing. Fortunately for the jet black, the machine did follow him in the conversation. I understand, and I almost forgot to thank you for saving me from almost drowning. I thought I wasn't going to tell at this time. Blitzman scratched his head at Issei's gratitude. Well, technically I didn't save you if I'm being honest. The boy looked at him waiting for an explanation. It turns out that you ended up inside a gate connected to the lake above, which absorbed you and took you to my work area. Therefore I think the thanks would be more for Gargles than me. Oh, of course. The boy didn't know what to say next. Then it was a miracle that it ended up near your work area. I suppose so. Gargles every now and then orders me to look for garbage from outside for his inventions, and believe me, there are people who throw away whatever they consider garbage. But well, as Gargles once said, the trash of an idiot is the fortune of a superior mind. A drop of sweat formed on the back of Issei's neck at the most edited saying he heard. I don't think that was the right phrase, but I'd rather not say anything, choosing to stay quiet. The boy looked at the place from above, noticing that the place was quite big. Now that I think about it, this place is our home. Blitzman finished, also looking down at his home from the top. Although I am aware of how I was born and also aware of who I am grateful to Gargles for creating me despite everything. Blitzman seemed happy about it, and Issei had his doubts. You don't mind me asking why he built you? I don't mean to criticize or offend him, but he seems more like a lonely grump than someone who appreciates someone's company. Blitzman sighed at that question and his expression changed to a lower one. Sigh, it's not his fault. His tone was noticeably discouraged. Things happened which are from his past, the same things which he doesn't want to talk about with anyone, and if I try to ask he just gets angry and leaves. I just wish I could better understand my creator's emotions and know why he doesn't trust anyone. Something from his past? The experience he lived was so bad that it led him to be distrustful of everything. I think I can understand. That was the boy's thought upon hearing Blitzman's words, and his consciousness was taken out of his thoughts when the elevator stopped. We've reached the surface, Blitzman announced, pointing ahead. Follow this path that leads out of the cave, and good luck with your life, boy. I appreciate it, Blitzman. The young man extended his hand to shake Blitzman's hand, but the robot did not understand the boy's action. What's happening? Sorry, I thought about shaking your hand, but I guess not. The boy got out of the elevator and Blitzman was about to activate the elevator again when he was stopped by the boy's voice. Hey Blitzman. Yeah? Will I see you again someday? The boy asked the robot, who didn't know what to answer. You are free to do whatever you want, the only problem would be Gargles. But if that is what you want, you are welcome whenever you want. Blitzman pressed the button and the ascent began to descend. I'm not saying this just because. I'm saying it because I really want to be his friend. Issei's words surprised Blitzman. What I mean is that if I want to be able to be his friend, I know I barely know you, but I really would like to be your friend. And Gargles, even if he is a grumpy, although his words were not clear to the robot. Blitzman's system warmed up in a pleasant way, which pleased the robot. Well, if you're willing to do it, I'll see you later, friend. He was the only thing he managed to say before disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel as he descended, saying goodbye pleasantly to his first human friend. With a pleasant feeling in his heart, the boy continued on his way out of the cave, and once outside, a current of air passed in front of him, which made him cold, and that made Issei remember that he was not wearing a shirt, and his clothes were torn. Fukuda, he commented depressedly on his way home, which was quite far away for his bad luck. Back in town night. The journey was long, and because it was already late, there were not many civilians on the street to see him, which was a pious gift for the boy who, tired, continued on his way to his home, which was already just around the corner. Finally, after a long trip, I was able to return to my apartment. I should consider buying a bicycle, because if I continue like this, my feet won't last. In his current state, the boy would not be very aware of his surroundings, which is why he ended up kicking a person who was on the ground. I'm not sorry I didn't see it. The boy, upon seeing him, would notice the unconscious person, and that mattered to him since he clumsily assumed it was his fault. Given the current situation, the boy did not think twice and grabbed the man by the legs to begin dragging him to his apartment, waiting for this guy to wake up okay, and not blaming him for knocking him out. With the boy back from the dead and future friendships in progress, Issei's day concluded for a new day filled with excitement and damn misfortune. But that's for a next episode.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.